Chapter 722. The flesh-winged horned monsters must not escape from the Yao ceiling tower. Let's go. We'll rush to the first floor and destroy the exit. Mu Yu made a prompt decision. The Yao ceiling tower's only exit was on the first floor. They had to destroy the exit and trap all the flesh-winged horned monsters in the Yao ceiling tower, preventing them from leaving. How are we going to deal with the death aura? Once the death aura goes out of control, even you won't be able to take it back. Little Commander asked seriously. There are so many flesh-winged horned monsters. We can't deal with them all. The only thing we can rely on is the death aura, Mu Yu said solemnly. He and Xiao Shui couldn't deal with two tribulation-passing stage members of the Gate of Hell and so many flesh-winged horned monsters at the same time. They could only rely on the death aura for now. Mu Ling quickly traveled through the void. The death aura had already spread to the other floors. With something to devour, the death aura grew faster and faster. Mu Yu didn't know how to resist the death aura at all. Are you planning to let the death aura devour the entire Yao ceiling tower? Little Commander asked in surprise. Do we have any other choice? Mu Yu asked. Then what happens after it devours the flesh-winged horned monsters? Little Commander asked again. Mu Yu pondered for a moment. The death aura has already gone out of control. I can't forcefully take it back now. Let's take it one step at a time. Mu Yu and the others quickly moved, trying to find a way out. Every floor had its own barrier. When Mu Yu and the other flesh-winged horned monsters rushed to the next floor, they were blocked by the barrier on the next floor. However, the death aura quickly followed. As long as the death aura melted a hole in the barrier, the entire barrier would quickly collapse. Mu Yu followed the flesh-winged horned monsters to a ravine mountain range. They didn't enter from the exit, so Mu Yu couldn't be sure which floor they were on. The flesh-winged horned monsters quickly scattered around the ravines, looking for the exit of this level. Mu Yu had already appeared behind a huge rock. Just now, he had fallen from the sky, and at this moment, it was as if someone had poked a hole in the sky, causing a shocking crack to appear. Countless runes were collapsing and splashing about, and the death aura was also surging in, crazily devouring the illusion array created by this layer. I have to find where the exit is. Mu Yu flew to the highest point and looked down from the sky. Countless flesh-winged and horned monsters rose and fell between the mountains, flying back and forth. Soon, one of the flesh-winged horned monsters shouted, "I found the exit!" All the flesh-winged horned monsters immediately flew towards the sound, and Mu Yu followed closely behind. After arriving at the passageway, he found that the words 7th floor were written on the side of the passageway. After following the exit of this floor to the next floor, he found that he had arrived at the 33rd floor. Mu Yu quickly calculated in his mind and found that if he took the other passageway on the 33rd floor, he wouldn't be able to rush to the first floor. We have to return to the previous floor and take another passageway, Mu Yu said as he walked back to the entrance. However, the vortex at the exit only flashed weakly for a moment before it collapsed, turning into little runes and disappearing. This is troublesome. The exit of every floor is a teleportation array. The teleportation array on the previous floor has already collapsed, and the teleportation array here can't connect to that floor, so it destroyed itself. Mu Yu's expression was very heavy. He recalculated the pattern of the exit and found that it would take at least 48 hours to return to the first floor. He couldn't afford to wait 48 hours because not all the flesh-winged horned monsters had gone to this floor. Some of the flesh-winged horned monsters, Gui Yezi, and the others had gone to other floors. It was very likely that they would reach the first floor before Mu Yu. Calm down. We need to rethink our strategy. Mu Yu glanced around. This floor was an ordinary tower without any extra decorations. The other exit was also very obvious. At this time, all the flesh-winged horned monsters had already left this floor, leaving only Mu Yu and Xiao Shui. We can't waste time here. Isn't there only one exit on this floor now? Qiao Shui believed that they should continue moving forward with the flesh-winged horned monsters. However, just as Mu Yu and Qiao Shui stepped into the exit, many flesh-winged horned monsters suddenly ran back in panic from the other side of the passageway. Every one of them was roaring in shock and anger. "Run, the death aura is coming! Why is the death aura still lingering around?" The flesh-winged horned monsters shouted. Dozens of flesh-winged horned monsters ran back. The last one roared at the top of its lungs. Its hand seemed to have been accidentally contaminated by the death aura. Then, from its fingers to its arm, and then its entire body was gradually devoured by the death aura. After being devoured, the death aura of the flesh-winged horned monster floated in the air. It moved lightly and quickly stuck to the wall. It began to devour the runes on the wall and the barrier on the wall. This layer of runes also began to shatter. Mu Yu and the other flesh-winged horned monsters once again entered the nothingness. At this moment, a slender white hand suddenly reached out from the nothingness and grabbed Mu Ling, who was shuttling through the nothingness. Then, golden runes flashed and brought Mu Yu out of the nothingness. "Who is it?" Mu Yu cautiously revealed himself from Mu Ling. That hand had moved too quickly. He didn't even have a chance to struggle before he was taken away. When Mu Yu saw his surroundings, he was shocked to discover that he had already arrived at the 81st level. He was at the foot of the mountain where the heavenly reincarnation seal was located. At this moment there was an extremely beautiful woman standing at the entrance of the heavenly reincarnation seal. This woman was graceful and graceful. She was ethereal and enchanting. She was like a celestial in a painting. She wasn't wearing any clothes, but her body was shrouded in a layer of hazy mist. It was difficult to see through her. "Who are you?" Mu Yu asked in surprise. The woman in front of him was like an otherworldly celestial maiden. Mu Yu couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. Then, Qiao Shui stepped on Mu Yu's foot. Mu Yu shrunk his foot back in pain. "Why did you step on me?" he mumbled. "Do I look good?" Qiao Shui said matter-of-factly. "Everyone loves beauty." Mu Yu rubbed his nose. "Oh, is that so?" Qiao Shui looked at Mu Yu with a hint of a smile. Mu Yu hurriedly splayed his hands open to express his innocence. "The deathly aura emanated from your body. You have to think of a way to salvage the situation." The beautiful woman looked at Mu Yu with an indifferent expression. This woman's eyes glowed with a faint golden light. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her facial features were elegant and regal. Any man would be tempted to take a few more glances at her. "Who are you?" Mu Yu asked. He was still wondering why Qiao Shui was able to step on him without using the horizon apart technique, even though he had the horizon apart formation on this floor. However, when he tried to sense it, he realized that the so close, yet worlds apart formation had already disappeared. To be more precise, it was more like it had been teleported away. "She's the pagoda spirit." Little Shui suddenly poked its head out. "You recognize me?" The pagoda spirit looked at Little Shui. "A certain aura from your body is the same as mine, although it's much weaker than mine." Little Shui pursed its lips. It was a sword spirit, after all, so it could still distinguish this. "You're the pagoda spirit? That's great. I was looking for you." Mu Yu breathed a sigh of relief. As long as he could find the pagoda spirit, he would be able to control the entire Yao Sealing Pagoda and undo the seal on the island. Most importantly, Helian Kong had said that the pagoda spirit could freely travel through any level. This way, he could have the pagoda spirit take him to the first level. "The deathly aura you left behind is about to destroy my body. You have to think of a way to take it back," the pagoda spirit said. "I can, but I need your help. You should know that the flesh-winged horned monsters can't leave the Yao Sealing Pagoda, right? You have to hurry up and seal the first level. Don't let them escape." Mu Yu said urgently. The pagoda spirit shook its head. "I won't listen to your orders because you haven't received my acknowledgement." This isn't an order, it's a suggestion. You have to know that Taoist Master Xian Jizi locked the flesh-winged horned monsters here because he didn't want them to escape, Mu Yu said urgently. Master told me not to interfere with the people who enter the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, so even if the prisoners left, I wouldn't care. However, the deathly aura originated from you, so you have to take it back. The pagoda spirit's voice was very ethereal, like the tinkling of spring water in a valley. Mu Yu refuted. Taoist Master Xian Jizi's original intention was to allow people to save the Sea Demon King, but not to let the flesh-winged horned monsters leave. Didn't he tell you this clearly? I don't remember if Master said this, the pagoda spirit said softly. You don't remember? What? As a pagoda spirit, you can still lose your memory? Mu Yu asked. The deathly aura injured my body. I suddenly forgot many things, the pagoda spirit answered very directly. Mu Yu opened his mouth, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Let me remind you. Your master once said that you can't let the flesh-winged horned monsters leave the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. You have to hurry up and seal off the entrance to the first floor. Mu Yu said. I don't remember him saying that, the pagoda spirit repeated. Her memories were becoming more and more blurry. She only had a rough idea. Huh? Why can't you make sense? Mu Yu felt very troubled. He thought of Xiao Shuai. Xiao Shuai was a sword spirit. He didn't know what had happened, but he'd lost his memories. He was also a bit dumb, but at least Xiao Shuai was much more intelligent than the pagoda spirit. You have to take back all of the deathly aura. That's why I'm looking for you, the pagoda spirit continued. Mu Yu rolled his eyes and came up with a plan. I can take back all of the deathly aura, but I can't do it all by myself. I'll need your help. If you don't help me, I won't be able to take back the deathly aura. The pagoda spirit was silent for a moment, then nodded. Okay. First, seal off all the exits of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Mu Yu immediately said. The pagoda spirit didn't move. She just stared at Mu Yu. Hurry up. What are you waiting for? Mu Yu felt like this woman was like a flower vase. She was pretty, but she was a bit slow on the uptake. It was difficult to communicate with her. I'm waiting for your other request. You should do the first thing first. But I've already done it, the pagoda spirit said calmly. Mu Yu rubbed his forehead, feeling a bit helpless. This woman hadn't even moved, and she'd already sealed off the first floor. She was a bit too efficient. Then he remembered that the pagoda spirit could control the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Sealing off the exits of any floor was just a matter of thought. Okay. Second, I need to control the entire Yao Ceiling Pagoda, Mu Yu said. Chapter 723. The pagoda genie refused to agree to Mu Yu's request. If I don't control the entire Yao Ceiling Pagoda, how will I know which floor the death aura has spread to? Mu Yu decided to use the method of persuasion to deal with this simple-minded person. I can tell you, the pagoda genie said. Although this pagoda genie was simple-minded, she still abided by her own principles. Without her approval, one could not control the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. This was what Taoist Master Xian Jizi had left her. The pagoda genie was dutiful, but this made Mu Yu go crazy. At this critical moment of life and death, this pagoda genie was still so stubborn. Couldn't it be more flexible? Do you think it's so easy to take back the death aura? The death aura's spread is irregular. Only by controlling the Yao Ceiling Pagoda can I know how far the death aura has spread. I can also analyze where to start. You're so smart, you should understand this, right? Mu Yu spoke in a methodical manner. In the end, he deliberately raised the pagoda genie so that she couldn't find anything to refute. The pagoda genie fell silent again. The death aura was constantly corroding the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and she was also affected. If she didn't stop the death aura from spreading, the entire Yao Ceiling Pagoda would be destroyed. At that time, she wouldn't be able to escape. Xiao Shui glanced at Mu Yu. Her watery spirit was still wrapped around Mu Ling. She said in her heart, "Why do I feel like you're trying to seduce a girl? Do you usually use flowery words to win a girl's favor and trust?" "No, don't think too much. I've only accidentally seduced you," Mu Yu muttered. "I'm not thinking too much," Qiao Shui said simply. "You obviously are." Mu Yu secretly curled his lips. The pagoda genie thought for a long time and finally said, "Okay, I'll recognize you as my master." Mu Yu smiled. After subduing the pagoda genie, the next step would be much easier. At least the shackles on the Yao Ceiling pagoda genie could be undone. They also had a better chance of escaping the ghost realm's clutches. That's right. After all, I don't have to be your master. We're just taking what we need. Mu Yu spread his hands, but he couldn't help but think in his heart, with your silly look, you're not as smart as Little Handsome. The tower genie slowly walked in front of Mu Yu. She reached out her slender hand and tapped the center of Mu Yu's forehead. A cool and refreshing aura entered his mind, and many incomplete memories suddenly appeared in his mind. Many of these memories told Mu Yu how to control the Yao Ceiling pagoda, as well as the secrets hidden in its depth. Then, the tower genie opened its arms and embraced Mu Yu. This was something that Mu Yu had not expected. Why were they hugging? They didn't even give him any time to mentally prepare himself. Being hugged by a hazy beauty, this feeling was too strange. Mu Yu was just about to reach out and hug the tower genie, but the tower genie had already turned into an illusory light and disappeared into his body. Then, Mu Yu's hand stupidly stopped in midair. "Ah, today is really a good day." Mu Yu quickly stretched out his hand to resolve the awkwardness. "Is that so?" Qiao Shui stared at Mu Yu again, revealing a meaningful smile, which made Mu Yu feel uncomfortable. "Just pretend I didn't say anything." Mu Yu touched his nose, feeling a little embarrassed. After the tower genie disappeared into Mu Yu's body, Mu Yu felt as if he was the entire Yao Ceiling pagoda. He could see all the situation of the Yao Ceiling pagoda genie at the moment, and he knew the array formations on each floor like the back of his hand. He could even see the flesh-winged horned monsters running around the Yao Ceiling pagoda. In order to avoid the death aura, they were like headless flies. The 39th floor of the moon god's prison was already filled with death aura. The death aura had spread to the other floors, and a total of 7 floors had been devoured by the death aura. But at this moment, the death aura seemed to have stopped spreading, as if it was being blocked by something. Mu Yu quickly came to his senses. The death aura was being blocked by a powerful, so close, yet worlds apart array formation. The so close, yet worlds apart array formation was originally used to protect the heaven-deriving reincarnation seal on the 81st floor. But in order to save itself, the tower genie had transferred the so close, yet worlds apart array formation on this floor, isolating all the death aura. No wonder Qiao Shui was able to step on my foot. I was wondering why the so close, yet worlds apart array formation didn't work, Mu Yu muttered. "I can hear what you're thinking." Qiao Shui's voice rang out in Mu Yu's mind. Mu Yu rolled his eyes and turned his attention back to the death aura. The so close, yet worlds apart array formation was set up by Jian Ying and Chen Feng. It was truly powerful, and for a moment it blocked all the death aura. But Mu Yu knew how powerful the death aura was. The so close, yet worlds apart array formation would eventually be devoured. Even his master had said that death aura was unstoppable. It would devour everything in the world. Back when Mu Yu was separating the netherworld grass life energy and death aura, Xie Bulo had used the same array formation to prevent the two from spreading. But at that time, the array formation contained life energy, so the so close, yet worlds apart array formation could last for a long time. But now, there was only death aura. It couldn't hold the death aura for too long. 7 floors of the Yao Ceiling pagoda had been devoured by the death aura. The death aura had temporarily stabilized. Mu Yu re-examined the situation of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and finally found the location of Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming. The two people from the Gate of Hell were currently scattered on different floors of the pagoda due to the chaos. Gui Yezi had long known the teleportation patterns of the exits of each floor. But because the teleportation arrays of several floors had been destroyed by the death aura, many of the exits had collapsed. Gui Yezi couldn't directly leave the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. But Gui Yezi was still experienced. He was about to reach the first floor. You want to leave the Yao Ceiling Pagoda? That won't do. I haven't finished dealing with the flesh-winged horned monsters yet. Mu Yu watched as Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming shuttled through each floor, trying to find an exit that hadn't failed yet. He wouldn't let the two of them leave so easily. He had to delay them. After Mu Yu gained control of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, although he couldn't change the teleportation patterns, he could freely travel through each floor like the pagoda spirit. He had already thought of a way to deal with the flesh-winged horned monsters and the two Japanese people. I have to help the Japanese people plan a good route. Xiao Shui, stay here and wait for me. I'll be right back. Mu Yu turned around and disappeared from the 81st floor. He arrived at the floor where Gui Yezi was about to enter. This floor was the snow mountain that Mu Yu had entered. At that time, it was on this floor that Mu Yu had stripped away the death aura in his body and dealt with Ziyuan. But it was also at that time that he should have brought Ziyuan's death aura back to the moon god's prison. Mu Yu landed in front of the small wooden house and destroyed the exit, blocking Gui Yezi's path. Then, he disappeared. Sure enough, in less than half a quarter of an hour, Gui Yezi quickly rushed over from the other end of the snow mountain. He wanted to leave this floor immediately. He had been looking for the exit to the first floor. The few routes that he had thought of earlier had all failed. Now that he had found a new path, he was impatient. But when he arrived at the other exit, his face suddenly sank. The small wooden house at the foot of the snow mountain had been crushed into a pile of rubble by the snow. The exit has been destroyed? Who did it? Gui Yezi's expression was very angry. He stood in place and pondered for a moment. Then, he flew back and retraced his original path. Because he did not know when the death aura would catch up to him, he did not dare to stay on the first floor for too long. He got closer and closer to the first floor several times, but it was as if someone was deliberately messing with him. They would always destroy the exit at the right time. Gui Yezi felt more and more suspicious. He had already sensed that something was wrong. If it was only one or two exits that were destroyed, it would make sense. But every time he tried to adjust his route, he would be blocked. It was impossible to believe that this was a coincidence. Could it be that kid? Gui Yezi quickly thought of Mu Yu. But he was also very puzzled. Gui Yezi had not sensed any trace of Mu Yu. Also, according to Gui Yezi's understanding, Mu Yu did not have the ability to destroy him at any time. Mu Yu also had to follow the rules of the exit. If he knew that Mu Yu had already gained control of the pagoda spirit, he would not be so puzzled. Then, the next step should be to head to the 46th floor. Mu Yu constantly paid attention to Gui Yezi's movements. His ultimate goal was to transfer Gui Yezi and Gui Yezi to the 46th floor. There was a spirit terminating no immortal area there. In the spirit terminating no immortal area, even a tribulation stage cultivator would not be able to resist. If Mu Yu wanted to defeat Gui Yezi, he could only rely on spirit terminating no immortal. Although Mu Yu had gained control of the Devil Ceiling Pagoda, other than controlling the entire pagoda, he did not gain any other special abilities. Gui Yezi and Gui Yezi were both tribulation stage self-cultivators. Mu Yu could not defeat the two of them with his own cultivation. And Mu Yu could not lead Gui Yezi and Gui Yezi to the death aura. First of all, Mu Yu was not confident that he could fully control the death aura. Secondly, the Sea Goblin King was under Gui Yezi's control and could not be devoured by the death aura. As for the remaining flesh-winged horned monsters, Mu Yu planned to lead them to the first floor and lock them up. Once he found a way to control the death aura, he would use the death aura to deal with them. He had been leading the way for the two Gui Yezi and the flesh-winged horned monsters. Soon, he led the monsters to a floor full of sea. That was the floor of the beginning of chaos, a place where imagination could create illusions. This time, using the Devil Sealing Pagoda's ability, he could easily imagine anything on this floor without spending too much energy. Mu Yu had already imagined a fake exit for the flesh-winged horned monsters. Through this exit, they would leave the Devil Sealing Pagoda and appear on Demon Island. The flesh-winged horned monsters were not as shrewd as Gui Yezi, nor did they understand the structure of the Devil Sealing Pagoda. They were extremely excited and crowded around the exit, but none of them went out. This was because the sun was shining outside, and the sunlight was very harmful to the flesh-winged horned monsters. Found the exit. Great! Now we only need to wait until night falls and we can leave this damned place forever. A flesh-winged horned monster shouted loudly. We can finally leave. This time I will eat everyone in the third layer of heaven. All the flesh-winged horned monsters cheered and looked eagerly outside the Devil Sealing Pagoda, waiting for the sun to set and the moon to rise to welcome their killing spree. Just wait. My sun will never set. Mu Yu smiled faintly. It was originally an imaginary fake exit, so he let these ugly monsters daydream. He would deal with them later. He used the Devil Sealing Pagoda's ability to control the beginning of chaos formation to remake it. Other than Mu Yu, no other thoughts of the flesh-winged horned monsters would have any effect. At this time, he finally arrived in front of the Death Chi. Before dealing with the Gui Yezi and the flesh-winged horned monsters, he must first deal with the Death Chi. Otherwise, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be. Mu Yu, are you sure you can absorb all the Death Chi into your body? Dragon Ting looked at the pitch-black Death Chi in front of him, and even he felt a little worried. Chapter 724. The Death Aura was spreading too quickly. It had swallowed too many things in the Yao-suppressing pagoda, including many flesh-winged and horned monsters. At this moment, it occupied an area of more than 100 square meters in the Yao-suppressing pagoda. 100 square meters was not a lot, but considering that it was slowly growing from the strand of black gas the size of a hair left behind by Mu Yu a few days ago, one could imagine how terrifying it was. If the Yao-suppressing pagoda genie had not used the so close, yet worlds apart formation to temporarily trap them, it would have been much worse. If Mu Yu directly rushed into the death aura and absorbed it, Mu Yu could not guarantee that he would not survive again. The last time he was in the middle of the death aura and death aura, he had already lost his life once. It was Deadwood Daddy who used blood cover the sky to exchange his life for Mu Yu's. Mu Yu would not let the same thing happen twice. He took out the Mu Ling. This treasure from the Yuman was originally something full of life. However, after absorbing the death aura, it became lifeless. Although it still retained the characteristics of a tree, Mu Yu felt that it was missing something. However, at this moment, he could only rely on the Mu Ling. All the death aura was surrounded by the so close, yet worlds apart formation and trapped in the middle of the Yao-suppressing pagoda. Mu Yu had already arrived beside the so close, yet worlds apart formation. Golden runes appeared on his hand and covered the Mu Ling, extending into the Mu Ling. After Mu Ling entered the death aura, all the death aura madly rushed towards the Mu Ling, wanting to devour the Mu Ling. The Mu Ling was originally something full of life and could restrain the death aura. Therefore, it was not afraid of the death aura's invasion. Countless holes appeared on its body and began to absorb the death aura. Mu Ling gradually absorbed a lot of the death aura. Mu Yu was also paying attention to Mu Ling's movements. However, after absorbing nearly 1/3 of the death aura, Mu Yu's face suddenly changed. Mu Ling had stopped absorbing the death aura. "What's wrong?" Little Marshall asked. Mu Yu said solemnly, "The wood spirits have already reached the limit of what they can withstand." This time, there was even more death aura than when Mu Yu separated the netherworld grass. At that time, the death aura had just appeared from the netherworld grass and had only devoured everything in the room. The amount of death aura that Mu Ling had devoured back then was not even 1% of what was in front of him. The aura of death in front of him had already consumed the entire prison and nearly half of the flesh-winged horned monsters. It had even consumed the 7th floor of the Yao-suppressing pagoda. The aura of death had expanded to a considerable extent. It was no longer something Mu Ling could deal with. What should we do now? If we don't hurry up and think of a solution, the death aura will go out of control sooner or later, Dragonting said. Many thoughts flashed through Mu Yu's mind. He focused his attention on the flesh-winged horned monsters that were still waiting to escape. Suddenly, a very bold idea appeared in his mind. "Little Marshal, will anger consume things to expand itself?" Mu Yu asked. "Do you want to strip the white spiritual power from your body?" Little Marshal said while wagging his tail. "Anger should be the same as death aura, right?" "They are the same. However, if you cultivate the white life aura to the point where it can compete with the death aura, you might be able to stop the expansion of the death aura. However, their existence is ultimately unstable. How do you plan to deal with the death aura and life aura that are entangled with each other?" Little Marshal asked. If Mu Yu cultivated life aura to the same level as death aura, life aura and death aura would restrict each other and not continue to expand. This was the only way Mu Yu could think of to deal with the death aura in front of him. Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal. Do you still remember? The last time we were in the Siren Palace, Gui Shiming and the others were corroding the barrier protecting the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal. However, I could directly enter the barrier without any hindrance. At that time, I discovered that the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal didn't seem to reject the black and white spiritual power in my body. Mu Yu had always felt that a heaven-defying treasure like the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal definitely had an extraordinary origin. It could return to the past and see what happened in the past. Although it couldn't change the past, it was already infinitely close to being able to pry into the heavenly Tao. Mu Yu was certain that a heaven-defying item like the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal definitely had a way to balance life aura and death aura. The Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal is indeed a very rare treasure. That's right, we can teleport the death aura and life aura to the past. Little Marshal said thoughtfully as he patted his head. Teleport to the past? What if the past world is destroyed? Long Ting asked, puzzled. In any case, the past can't affect our present. Therefore, if the past world is destroyed, it will be like nothing happened to us, Little Marshal said. Then wouldn't it be very cruel to the people living in the past? Long Ting didn't like this decision. To a certain extent, using the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal to return to the past meant that the people in the past were real. The Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal wrongly combined people from different spacetimes. Once the people who returned to the past left the past, the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal would no longer be effective. Then, all spacetime would return to normal. If Mu Yu guided these two auras to the past, then the past spacetime would have life and death auras that didn't belong to it. Under the influence of the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal, spacetime wouldn't return to normal. The past would also be affected by the life aura and death aura. There was even a certain possibility that it would be destroyed. However, Mu Yu shook his head and said, I won't send them to the past. I'm only temporarily sealing them in the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal. After leaving this place, I'll seal them in the spatial barrier under Mass Burial Valley. The spatial barrier was the most suitable place to store such dangerous things. Even if the life aura and death aura went out of control, the spatial barrier would block them. The life aura and death aura couldn't devour the matter in the spatial barrier. This was something Mu Yu was certain of. Back then, Ciebulo said that the first layer of heaven was destroyed because the underworld grass went out of control. However, the death aura didn't affect the second layer of heaven. This meant that they couldn't devour the spatial barrier and go to the second layer of heaven. Then you should guide the life aura out first. As for the nutrients for the life aura, I don't think I need to talk about it, right? Little Handsome was interested again. Poor flesh-winged horned monster. It's still fanatically trying to escape and destroy the world. Longting laughed. Mu Yu's left hand was already glowing with white light. He had done this once before, so he wasn't unfamiliar with it. Back then, Mu Yu had removed a bit of death aura, but his body didn't go out of control. This meant that the life aura and death aura in his body could automatically return to a balanced state to a certain extent. A strand of white spirit energy the size of a fingertip turned into life aura and floated in the air. This was the only bit that Mu Yu had the ability to control. At this moment, he had already arrived at the level where the flesh-winged horned monsters were locked up. Those monsters were still waiting for the sun to set, but Mu Yu had already secretly placed his life aura on a blue flesh-winged horned monster. After the white life aura contaminated the flesh-winged horned monsters, it did not devour them directly like the death aura. On the contrary, the life aura directly integrated into the bodies of the flesh-winged horned monsters as if nothing had happened. The flesh-winged horned monsters did not notice anything unusual. Mu Yu, your life aura isn't fake, right? Long Ting asked in confusion. From his point of view, the life aura should also devour things to strengthen itself. Don't worry, let's wait and see. Mu Yu knew that things wouldn't be so simple. After all, the death aura didn't move at the beginning. It was because the flesh-winged horned monster accidentally stepped on the purple resentment corpse water that it began to move crazily. This required a condition to activate it. At this moment, the flesh-winged horned monster that was possessed by the white life aura suddenly became extremely excited. It even stood up and began to dance and shout. At the same time, its life aura gradually became stronger, as if it had recovered its cultivation. The flesh-winged horned monster had been locked up for thousands of years. Its life aura had long become very sluggish, and its cultivation had also fallen very seriously. At this time, the blue flesh-winged horned monster's life aura suddenly increased rapidly, which naturally attracted the attention of its kind. Lon, what's wrong with you? Yes. How did you recover your cultivation? That's not right. Your cultivation was originally at the combination stage. Why is it now faintly showing signs of breaking through to the crossing calamity stage? All the flesh-winged horned monsters looked at the blue flesh-winged horned monster in bewilderment. However, the expression of the flesh-winged horned monster named Lon became more and more excited. There was even an incomparably ardent hope in its eyes, as if it had seen a beam of light in the darkness. I'm finally going to leave here. I'm going to eat 100 cultivators for a sumptuous meal. I can't wait to get out now. Lon shouted fanatically. Then its body began to emit a white light. This white light was completely inconsistent with its blue body. Even its skin was suffused with a white light, as if something was going to drill out of its body. Bang! The blue flesh-winged horned monster's body suddenly exploded, but no blue corpse water splashed out. When its body exploded, it had already turned into a pure white life aura. It floated out and attached itself to the flesh-winged horned monsters that couldn't dodge in time, merging into their bodies. All the flesh-winged horned monsters were stunned by Lon Lanlan's explosion. They didn't understand why it would suddenly self-destruct. However, not long after, the flesh-winged horned monsters that were infected by the white life aura began to show the same situation as Lon. They began to become excited and fanatical. Bang! 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 Explosions sounded one after another. The flesh-winged horned monsters began to grow stronger and then self-destruct. After being infected by the life aura, All the life force in their bodies seemed to be completely stimulated and then began to be overdrawn. In the end, it directly turned into white life aura and scattered. How terrifying! Mu couldn't help but swallow. He found that the white spiritual energy in his body had such a terrifying lethality. It was simply a super explosive pill that could explode the world at any time. If Mu didn't control it well, the 3 continents would very likely be destroyed by his hands. I definitely won't use this ability next time, Mu secretly told himself. The black and white spiritual energies were too powerful after losing their restraint. They would devour other things to strengthen themselves. This kind of terrifying ability shouldn't exist in a person's body. At this time, the white life aura had gathered more and more. It even began to spread to the formation of primordial chaos. The scene that Mu imagined gradually cracked and was invaded by the white life aura. It then became stronger and finally cracked. Chapter 725. Mu naturally did not dare to use his own body to guide the white life force. Otherwise, he would definitely end up like those flesh-winged horned monsters. The worst-case scenario would be that it would cause the black and white chi in his body to space-time and make things worse. The so close, yet worlds apart, formation was like a giant net at this time, wrapping all the death chi in it. Fortunately, this giant net could be slightly deformed. Although it took Mu a lot of effort, he was still able to turn it into a long and narrow shape, extending it into the beginning of chaos formation. However, Mu soon discovered that the white life force was completely out of control. It was constantly affecting the flesh-winged horned monsters, making them excited and see hope. Then, they would be overwhelmed by the hope and power and explode, transforming the flesh-winged horned monsters into a part of themselves. The situation was getting more and more chaotic. All the flesh-winged horned monsters had been destroyed by the white life force, but because of this, the white life force was getting stronger and stronger, and it was constantly eroding the entire formation. White life chi's method of corroding formations was different from that of death chi. Death chi would directly devour the formations, while life chi would make the things it came into contact with stronger, completely erupting their hidden potential until they had no more potential left, exploding and becoming a part of white life chi. Mu did not dare to get too close, nor did he dare to casually remove the so close, yet worlds apart, formation. He planned to use Mu Ling as a bridge to guide the white life force into the formation to compete with the death chi. Golden runes covered the wood spirit, and the world's end next neighbor formation turned the wood spirit into a slender branch. One end of the branch extended into the world's end near, yet worlds apart formation, while the other end was drawn into the white vitality. After the white life force encountered the lifeless Mu Ling, it began to crazily rush towards it. It was obvious that the life force wanted to drive away the death chi, or rather, it wanted to transform Mu Ling into a part of itself. The life force quickly covered Mu Ling and began to fill the Mu Ling. Then, it followed Mu Ling into the worlds apart formation. The black and white chi collided with each other. The two completely different auras entangled together violently, devouring each other, trying to suppress the other. In the formation of so close yet worlds apart, the death aura had the absolute advantage at the beginning. The white life aura would be tightly suppressed as soon as it entered, but as the white life aura increased, it began to resist and quickly grew stronger. The life force seemed to be trying to suppress the death chi. All the life force outside followed Mu Ling and entered the worlds apart formation. At this time, the death chi and the life force had gathered in the worlds apart formation. Mu immediately removed the worlds apart formation on Mu Ling and wanted to take the Mu Ling back. Calm, however, Mu was suddenly startled because he discovered that the wood spirit had changed once again. Originally, after absorbing the death aura, the wood spirit's entire body would be black. But now, the wood spirit's body was flowing with a white aura. The white qi intertwined with the original black qi. The whole Mu Ling sword became very strange. Mu Ling's sword was already a mixture of black and white. Black and white light chased each other on its body. Originally, there were many holes of different sizes on Mu Ling. After absorbing the death qi, those holes were filled with black death qi and were not repaired. But at this time, those holes were like the Tai Chi yin-yang fish. One black and one white qi flowed together. The aura of the whole Mu Ling sword had undergone a tremendous change. Originally, it had always been lifeless, but now it was full of vitality. The two auras each occupied half of the sword. When Mu Yu wanted to take it back, it sent a desire to Mu Yu. You want to absorb the two auras inside? Mu Yu looked at Mu Ling in surprise. The thought that Mu Ling's sword transmitted to him just now shocked him. If you can do it, then go ahead and try. Mu Yu thought about it again and decided not to stop Mu Ling. This broken sword usually followed Mu Yu's wishes no matter what it did. This was the first time it took the initiative to ask to do something. After getting Mu Yu's permission, the golden formation pattern on Mu Ling's body lit up again. It directly entered, so close, yet so far, and rushed into the battlefield where the black and white qi were fighting. As soon as Mu Ling entered, it immediately turned into a huge Bodhi tree. This Bodhi tree was different from any other plants that Mu Ling usually turned into. Although it was tall, its branches and leaves were yellow. Moreover, there were countless wormholes on each leaf, as if they were bitten by insects. Not only that, but the entire Bodhi tree's trunk and branches were also filled with countless holes. It looked extremely haggard. The sudden appearance of the Bodhi tree made the black and white qi very irritable. This was because this was their battlefield. No outsiders were allowed to invade. The black and white qi came with great momentum. As they intertwined, they swept towards the Bodhi tree, wanting to devour and destroy it. However, no one expected that the holes on the withered leaves of the Bodhi tree that looked like they had been bitten by insects suddenly emitted an extremely powerful suction force. It actually took the initiative to suck in the black and white qi. Every hole on the Bodhi tree was crazily devouring the black and white qi, and those holes gradually began to heal. The withered leaves also began to turn green, becoming full of vitality again. This sudden situation surprised even Mu Yu because he never knew that Mu Ling's sword had such an ability. The Bodhi tree also looked very familiar. Mu Yu remembered that there was a Bodhi tree like this in the Yuman. At that time, the old tree chief also took out Mu Ling from that Bodhi tree and gave it to Mu Yu. However, at that time, the Bodhi tree did not look as haggard as Mu Ling looked. "Little Commander, how much do you know about Mu Ling?" Mu Yu couldn't help but ask. The aura of life and death could devour everything, but it couldn't devour Mu Ling. What kind of sacred item was Mu Ling? Little Commander was also very puzzled. "I don't know. Back when you separated the aura of life and death from the netherworld grass, it wasn't this enthusiastic. Indeed, back when Mu Yu separated the aura of life and death from the netherworld grass, Mu Ling didn't appear this strange Bodhi tree, nor did it deliberately absorb the two auras. Today, it actually showed a very eager desire. It was very strange. Mu Yu couldn't understand, and neither could Little Commander. They could only wait outside. They waited for 4 hours. Mu Yu didn't dare to do anything else, afraid that if something unexpected happened, he wouldn't be able to deal with it in time. However, the black and white qi in the so close, yet worlds apart, formation gradually decreased. In the end, they were all absorbed by the Bodhi tree formed by Mu Ling. The Bodhi tree, which was originally yellow and emaciated, seemed to have regained its vitality. Its branches and leaves became verdant, and all the holes had healed. The Bodhi tree swayed gently in the air, and finally turned back into the Mu Ling sword. At this time, the wood spirit sword changed its appearance once again. Its body was originally riddled with holes, but now those holes had disappeared, and it had turned into an intact sword. The two sides of the sword were white, but there were black stripes in the middle of the sword. At the end of the sword hilt, there were black and white yin-yang fishes flowing. Overall, black and white occupied the sword. Furthermore, the sword was no longer broken. On the contrary, it became very charming, and there was an indescribable power contained in it. The Mu Ling sword hummed softly and made a crisp sound. The sword tip was extremely sharp, like a divine weapon. It became very unfamiliar to Mu Yu. Mu Yu's mind moved, and the Mu Ling sword felt Mu Yu's summon. It left the formation and flew towards Mu Yu. Mu Yu grabbed the sword. 1. A terrifying aura suddenly came from the Mu Ling sword into Mu Yu's body. This aura seemed to have been immersed in the battlefield for many years, and it was a bloody and evil aura that could only be obtained after killing countless people. This aura entered Mu Yu's mind, and caused a tremendous change in Mu Yu's body. He found that he suddenly had an unconcealable desire for blood in his heart. He wanted to kill. Mu Yu's eyes changed again. His left eye was suffused with a white light, and his right eye was flashing with a black light. His body also emitted a cold and emotionless spiritual energy fluctuation. Life became so fragile in his eyes, and this power made him feel very satisfied. He even felt that he should balance the world according to his own ideas. He should let the people who deserved to die die, and let the people who deserved to live live. He wanted to be the master of life. Mu Yu was immersed in this power, but this time he did not lose himself. On the contrary, he was very clear-headed. He suddenly realized something and quickly let go of the Mu Ling sword. "What's wrong? Mu Yu, I feel like you just..." Little Shuai asked hesitantly. He and Long Ting were originally on Mu Yu's shoulder, but the moment Mu Yu held the Mu Ling sword, a cold killing intent spread out from Mu Yu's body. It made Little Shuai and Long Ting's hearts palpitate, and they involuntarily flew out. The power of slaughter. Mu Yu slowly exhaled. Looking at the Mu Ling sword in front of him, he suddenly felt a surge of emotion. That's right, this was the power of slaughter. Mu Yu was extremely certain because back in the Moyen mountain range, the old tree chief had once touched Mu Yu's body with a terrifying power. At that time, Mu Yu had almost lost control and wanted to endlessly kill to satisfy his thirst for blood. When the Mu Ling sword came into contact with Mu Yu just now, the power was just as cold. The only difference was that when the old tree chief came into contact with his power, Mu Yu could not maintain his consciousness. However, the power of slaughter from the Mu Ling sword made Mu Yu extremely clear-headed. He already understood why the Mu Ling sword would take the initiative to absorb the black and white gas. It was because the black and white gas were devouring thousands of flesh-winged horned monsters. The entire prison's flesh-winged horned monsters were devoured by the death aura and life aura. This was equivalent to creating a massacre. In order to repair Mu Ling's injuries, he needed to kill. Back when Mu Yu separated the underworld grass, the black and white gas only devoured the furniture in a room and did not devour any life. Therefore, the Mu Ling sword did not take the initiative to absorb it. And this time, all of the black and white energies had grown by devouring the flesh-winged horned monsters. These energies contained tens of thousands of lives. In order for the wood spirit sword to repair itself, it needed the power of slaughter to replenish itself. Mu Yu thought that he would have a long way to go to repair Mu Ling's injuries, but he did not expect that those flesh-winged horned monsters would become the source of his power of slaughter. With the power of slaughter, he could destroy the balance of the 5 elements in a person's body and unlock the 9th heaven sealing demon formation. Chapter 726. The power of slaughter was the key to unlocking the 9 heavens demon sealing formation. It could also allow Mu Yu's cultivation to skyrocket. However, Mu Yu hesitated because he didn't like the power that thirsted for blood. Although he was able to keep his consciousness clear after coming into contact with the power of slaughter this time, The feeling of the power of slaughter made him very cold and manic. He even found that the lives of those related to him didn't seem that important, including Deadwood Daddy. After coming into contact with the power of slaughter, Mu Yu's heart began to have a mentality of indifference towards life. He believed that only those who had his permission could live. However, he couldn't recognize the dividing line between the two. Who should live the most? For a moment, he thought of Deadwood Daddy, but the idea of reviving Deadwood Daddy seemed to be insignificant in his heart. Slaughter made him very tyrannical, but it also made him lose his original intention. He was very worried that if he used this power, under the imperceptible influence, would there be a day when he would become numb? Mu Yu clenched his fist. Mu Yu, this time, do you plan to try to guide Mu Ling's power to unlock the 9 Heavens Demon Sealing Formation? Little Commander asked. Mu Yu's expression wavered. He pondered for a long time before finally shaking his head. I can't accept this power right now. Then Deadwood Daddy, after we find Soul Return and repair Deadwood Daddy's soul, I will use the power of slaughter to unlock the 9 Heavens Demon Sealing Formation. I will use the power of life and death in the blink of an eye. If I use it now, I'm worried that my nature will be changed, Mu Yu said calmly. Unlocking the 9 Heavens Demon Sealing Formation wasn't urgent because Deadwood Daddy's soul hadn't recovered yet. Mu Yu cast his gaze back to Mu Ling's sword. He didn't want to touch it again. Can you retract that power? Mu Yu asked Mu Ling. Mu Ling's sword trembled slightly. Its body flashed with black and white light. The light flowed, but it transmitted a thought that it couldn't do it. It had already become a sword of slaughter. It had the aura of slaughter. This aura could make Mu Yu stronger, but it would also affect Mu Yu. Let it return to the Shadow Clone Sword. The Shadow Clone Sword can prevent it from coming into contact with you. However, if you don't want to use Mu Ling, it means that you can no longer make Mu Ling transform into plants, Little Commander said. Many times, Mu Ling would instantly transform into various plants to help fight against opponent. Moreover, when dealing with the people from the Gate of Hell, Mu Yu relied on Mu Ling's death aura to suppress the ghostly aura of the people from the Gate of Hell. When Mu Yu couldn't block an attack, he would directly hide in Mu Ling and let Mu Ling take the fatal blow for him. However, now that Mu Ling had become a complete sword, its body was filled with a murderous aura. If Mu Yu didn't want to be affected by it, he couldn't rely on Mu Ling anymore. After suddenly losing Mu Ling's help, Mu Yu felt a little disappointed. It was as if he had lost a beloved friend. Right now, he could still control trees, and he could also control seeds to grow into towering trees. However, compared to the wood spirit's ability to transform at will, he was still far from being able to do so. Mu Ling could sense Mu Yu's rejection. It also emitted a very disappointed thought, but it still merged with the Shadow Clone Sword. Little Commander took the Shadow Clone Sword. A green light flashed across the Shadow Clone Sword. Then, he handed the sword to Mu Yu. The sword was still the same sword, but it lacked the aura that made Mu Yu happy. Plans can never keep up with changes, right? Now that the crisis of death aura and life aura has been resolved, and the problem of the flesh-winged horned monsters has been resolved, all that's left is to deal with the 2 old Japanese. Dragon Vine stretched and landed on Mu Yu's shoulder again. That's right. Mu Yu smiled. Originally, he had planned to use the reincarnation seal to collect the death aura and life aura before throwing them into the spatial barrier below Mass Burial Valley. Now, it seemed that there was no need for that. Mu Ling's sword had helped him solve everything. Just as they were focusing on the spirit-terminating no-immortal domain, Mu Yu's expression suddenly changed. This was because the shadows of Gue Yezi and Gue Yeming had long disappeared from the 46th floor. Where did those 2 Japanese guys go? Mu Yu was shocked. Then, he quickly discovered a serious problem. This was because he realized that the spirit-terminating no-immortal domain had started to become dangerous. A hole had appeared in the ruins there. Although the hole did not spread, It was that hole that allowed Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to escape. At this moment, the two of them had actually escaped to the first floor through the void. What annoyed Mu Yu the most was that the runes at the exit of the first floor had also been damaged. What's going on? Long Ting and Xiao Shuai were equally puzzled. Earlier, because Mu Ling had rushed in to fight with the life and death aura, they had focused all their attention on Mu Ling. For a moment, they did not pay attention to the situation in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Originally, they thought that after dealing with the threat of life aura and death aura, they would go to the spirit-terminating no immortal domain to find Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to settle the score. Unexpectedly, the two of them had suddenly escaped. Mu Yu carefully sensed the runes of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda and discovered a very serious problem. After the runes of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda were affected by the life aura, all the runes became very active. This caused some of the runes to run wrong, causing the runes to crack. The runes on the spirit-terminating no immortal level were also affected because of this. Although the white life aura had been removed from the runes in order to fight against the death aura, the hidden danger had already been planted, allowing Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming to escape. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming were at the first entrance. They had already found the crack in the runes and were working together to attack it. Can we stop them? Xiao Shuai asked. Mu Yu shook his head. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda is already too damaged. It can't help us trap the two of them anymore. Boom. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming worked together to attack the crack again. The runes trembled. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the crack expanded to the point where it would be difficult for them to escape. Mu Yu's mind moved, and the first level's exit automatically appeared. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming stopped attacking the crack and left the Yao Ceiling Pagoda through the exit. So we're just going to let them go? Long Ting said unwillingly. If we don't let them go, they will damage the Yao Ceiling Pagoda even more. We can't just run in front of them and stop them, can we? Mu Yu said in a low voice. He had to admit that because he had to deal with the problem caused by the death aura, he had missed the best opportunity to deal with the people from the gate of hell. Now that the Kraken King was under Gui Yezi's control, he had to think of another way to free the Kraken King. It looked like only Boss Lu could do that. Since Boss Lu has the Kraken King's blood, let's go find his body first. Mu Yu quickly searched through every level of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda in his mind, and finally found Boss Lu and the Dragon Turtle on the 31st level. Boss Lu was lying on the ground, no longer breathing. There was a shocking bloody hole in his forehead, and his eyes were wide open. He had died with a grievance. Mu Yu's mind moved, and he turned around to Boss Lu's side. He's dead. Even if he had anything on him, the ghost leopard must have stolen it, Long Ting said regretfully. Mu Yu carefully examined Boss Lu. Boss Lu's body was cold and stiff, and he had been dead for at least 2 days. But Mu Yu made a soft sound of surprise and found something amiss. Boss Lu's body looked dead in every way, and Mu Yu was very sensitive to the fluctuations of life force. He was surprised to find that the body still had a bit of life force left. This life force was extremely weak, and if not for Mu Yu's powerful senses, he would not have noticed it. He's not dead yet. Mu Yu looked at the bloody hole in Boss Lu's forehead. The shocking wound had already formed a scab, as if a strange power was slowly healing it. He thought for a moment, and found that the life force in Boss Lu's body was showing signs of recovery. He immediately used his spiritual power to help Boss Lu guide the life force. 2 hours later, Boss Lu opened his eyes. His consciousness was still blurry, but he suddenly remembered something. His body twitched, and he tried to stand up in a panic. "It's okay, Boss Lu, it's me," Mu Yu said. Boss Lu saw Mu Yu clearly and was pleasantly surprised. "Is it Mu Yu? I thought it was someone from the gate of hell." He panted weakly, and reached out to touch the bloody hole in his forehead. His heart was still beating fast. "Are you okay?" Mu Yu helped Boss Lu up. To be able to survive such a fatal injury, Boss Lu must have some secrets. Ah! Ghost Leopard ambushed us. I had the white ape ancestor's life-saving treasure, so I pretended to be dead and escaped. Unfortunately, Dragon Turtle was not so lucky. Boss Lu looked regretfully at Dragon Turtle's cold corpse, and he shook his head and sighed. The situation is bad now. Xiao Shui said that you have the key to saving Sea Goblin King. We need to find Ghost Realm. Mu Yu told Boss Lu about Sea Goblin King. Originally, Boss Lu was very excited when he heard that Sea Goblin King had escaped, but when Mu Yu told him that Sea Goblin King had become Ghost Realm's body, Boss Lu was shocked. How could this be? How could someone from the Gate of Hell control Sea Goblin King? Boss Lu was very anxious. He came for Sea Goblin King. If Sea Goblin King was controlled by someone from the Gate of Hell, the situation would be very bad. What's the use of being anxious now? Even the sea-calming Thousand Ruler was stolen. Damn it, Dragon Vine muttered unhappily. Boss Lu lowered his head and said guiltily, Lord True Dragon, I am sorry. I am useless. The people from the Gate of Hell are very strange. You were unlucky to have met them. Now, the people from the Gate of Hell have already controlled Sea Goblin King. Boss Lu, do you have Sea Goblin King's blood on you? This was what Mu Yu wanted. Sea Goblin King only had his own blood, so he could escape the control of the blood demon puppet and take back his body. I do, but, if you do, then hurry up and take it out, Mu Yu said. Boss Lu smiled bitterly and said, Sea Goblin King's blood flows in my body. When Boss Lu said this, everyone was a little surprised. Mu Yu looked at Boss Lu in confusion. You are the descendant of Sea Goblin King? Sea Goblin King said he was Black Tortoise. Little Shui thought Black Tortoise was a turtle. Although Sea Goblin King denied it, Black Tortoise was definitely not a deer. Boss Lu shook his head and said, No, Old Turtle and I were originally souls guarding the teleportation array in the second sky. In order to save Lord Sea Goblin King this time, the white ape ancestor found two bodies. With Sea Goblin King's blood as a guide, he used a secret technique to resurrect Old Turtle and me in these two bodies. As long as Sea Goblin King strips Old Turtle's or my blood, he can be reborn. Mu Yu frowned. Some of the techniques of the goblin race sounded very uncomfortable. Did he have to store the blood in the body? Mu Yu asked. Yes, before Sea Goblin King was sealed, he sent his blood to the teleportation array in the second sky. Originally, there was a special array there to cultivate his blood, but when the blood left the array, it was easy to have problems. So he had no choice but to use Old Turtle and me. Only in this way can the blood be perfectly preserved, Boss Lu said. Every Goblin King before being sealed would send out their most important things. White Ape Goblin King's internal elixir, Sand Eagle Goblin King's heart, Sea Goblin King's blood, so it was not strange. As for why Sea Goblin King had to teleport to the second sky, it was because the whole island had been sealed by Reverend Xian Jizi. He had no other choice. After a long silence, Mu Yu said, So when Sea Goblin King is resurrected, you will die? When Boss Lu's body ran out of blood, it was equivalent to the body running out of life force. His soul would float out. Without the protection of the Demon Clan's array formation in the Second Sky Island, Boss Lu's soul would soon lose consciousness. Sacrificing ourselves for Lord Sea Goblin King, this is my and Old Turtle's honor, Boss Lu said solemnly. When he said this, he did not hesitate at all. For Boss Lu, this was his mission. Obviously, he was prepared to sacrifice himself long ago. He was willing to exchange his life for Sea Goblin King's resurrection. Mu Yu shook his head. Boss Lu was willing to sacrifice himself for Sea Goblin King. He was indeed a loyal goblin race member. An Old Turtle, whose whereabouts were unknown, was also a similar person. Although these two guys were strange, and had once tricked Mu Yu for almost a year when he was in the second sky, their loyalty to the true dragon and Sea Goblin King was enough to make Mu Yu feel respect. Compared to the cowards in Dragon's Star Fall who sought refuge with the Gate of Hell in order to survive, this was a world of difference. Chapter 727. Muyu, hurry up and take me out of here. As long as I can see Mr. Siren King's body, he will be able to sense the blood in my body. Then, I will be able to wake him up, Boss Lu said in a hurry. Muyu nodded. At this time, the Yao Sealing Pagoda had not lifted the seal on the entire island, but he was sure that Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming had not left the island yet. After all, Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming knew that they had to rely on Muyu to find soul transference. Before Muyu was captured, the people from the Gate of Hell would not give up so easily. He took Boss Lu and left this floor, then returned to the 81st floor to pick up Qiao Shui. At the same time, Muyu found the other members of the demon race. He found Long Yeli and Yiwen Mao, who had gone through the wrong passage. The rest of the demon race had been devoured by the death aura. He Zipping was a hippopotamus. He did not enter the tower, but stood guard outside in case of an emergency. But now that the island had been bathed in blood, he was most likely dead. Muyu also found a severed soul stage member from the Gate of Hell. He was running around the tower, but because the tower's exit had been destroyed, he could not find the exit. Muyu did not hesitate to kill this fish that had escaped the net. There was no need to show mercy. 11 people from the Gate of Hell had entered the tower, but 4 of them had been killed by Muyu. The rest of the people from the Gate of Hell had died in the death aura. Only Gui Xie Ming and Gui Leopard had left the tower. Now, there were still 4 people from the Gate of Hell on the island. Muyu gathered the rest of the demon race. Although they outnumbered the people from the Gate of Hell, they were not enough to kill Gui Yezi. Qiao Shui did not want Muyu to put himself in danger. Only then could the tower protect them. But this stalemate was not a solution. He could only believe that Boss Lu could subdue Gui Yezi and chase him out of the Siren King's body. Then, he could rely on the Siren King, who had recovered his powers, to deal with Gui Yeming. Gui Yezi and Gui Yeming were waiting at the entrance of the Yao Sealing Pagoda. They did not believe that Muyu would die so easily from the terrifying aura of death. Muyu took a deep breath. After discussing the matter with the others, he left the Yao Sealing Pagoda. Gui Yezi and the others were waiting for him. "You're really lucky you're still alive," Gui Yezi sneered as he watched Muyu walk out of the Yao Sealing Pagoda alone. His body was still brimming with killing intent. Muyu's appearance had given him too many surprises and disrupted many of his plans. Gui Yezi hated Muyu to the bone. "The two of you are quite tough as well. You didn't get devoured by the deathly aura." Muyu felt a little regretful. If he could control the aura of death as he wished, he would have dealt with these 2 people long ago. He would not have caused so much trouble. "So, are you willing to take us to find the soul transference, or do I have to do it myself?" Gui Yezi looked high and mighty. In his eyes, Muyu could not do much, and there was no way he could escape from the 4 of them. "Before we go looking for the soul transference, there is one more thing that needs to be done." Muyu looked at Gui Yezi closely. "Are you talking about how to leave this island?" "Don't worry, we already have a way to leave this place," Gui Yezi said confidently. Muyu shook his head. "It's not about how to leave this place. It's about time you return the body to its rightful owner." As soon as Muyu finished speaking, Boss Lu flashed out from behind him and bit his finger. 2 thin lines of blood intersected in the air, forming a complicated demon totem. It was exactly the same as the one Muyu saw at the entrance of the demon race's holy road. This totem was heptagonal, with a throne in the middle. The throne seemed to be made up of coral reefs, and there were many strange shapes on it. In the eyes of Xiao Shui and Longting, it was ugly graffiti. At this time, Boss Lu's body lit up with a white light. The blood vessels under his skin bulged, and the blood flowed rapidly on them as if they were boiling. Boss Lu's aura suddenly became incomparably majestic, as if something supreme was about to come out of his body. Gui Yezi looked at Boss Lu with disdain. What? Do you really think a mere body integration stage demon can defeat us? But before he could finish, his expression changed drastically. His body began to tremble uneasily, and his blood began to resonate with Boss Lu's. Damn it, Gui Yeming, kill that demon! Gui Yezi roared, and a blood-red fog rose from his body, enveloping him. He wanted to cut off his connection with Boss Lu's blood, but the suppressed Siren King was stimulated by his own blood, and began to resist. Mu Yu, don't let them interrupt me. Boss Lu gritted his teeth, and a pained expression appeared on his face. But the blood totem in front of him was still glowing with a strange light, trying to awaken the Siren King. Mu Yu looked at the charging Gui Yeming with a serious expression. There was no time to hesitate, and he had to protect Boss Lu from harm. He had wanted to let Boss Lu use this technique in the Demon Sealing Pagoda, but the Demon Sealing Pagoda would isolate all auras. Now that the Demon Sealing Pagoda was severely damaged, even Mu Yu could not do this. Everyone, try to stall for time. Don't fight recklessly. Mu Yu shouted. Xiao Shui, Long Yeli, and Yiwen Mao all rushed out and faced Gui Yeming together with Mu Yu. However, Gui Yeming was a transcending tribulation cultivator from the ghost sect. His aura was still too strong for the four of them. Gui Yeming merely raised his hand, and all of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. At this time, Gui Bao and Gui Shiming also attacked together, ready to kill the people in the way. You guys deal with Gui Bao and Gui Shiming. I'll stop Gui Yeming, Mu Yu said. But you. Xiao Shui wanted to help Mu Yu, but Mu Yu was already far away. At this time, Gui Shiming's spirit chain was thrown at her, and she had to dodge. Boss Lu, hurry up. Mu Yu's cultivation was only at the severed soul stage. He only had the strength of a body fusion stage cultivator because of He Lienkong's soul armament. But against Gui Yeming, who was at the tribulation passing stage, he had no chance of winning. But the arrow had already been knocked. If he did not protect Boss Lu and let Boss Lu be interrupted, everything would be for naught. Now, Boss Lu had at least used the secret technique of the Yao clan to delay Gui Yeming, so Gui Yeming could not do anything to them. This was the best news so far. Mu Yu had transferred the so close, yet worlds apart from the Yao Sealing Pagoda to himself. He could only rely on this formation now. When Gui Yeming saw Mu Yu coming at him, he did not care about Mu Yu at all. His hand formed a gloomy ghost claw, and he continued to grab Boss Lu. Your opponent is me. Mu Yu's fingers moved continuously. The formation runes spread out with him as the center, covering Boss Lu in an instant. At the same time, Gui Yeming's ghost claw fell on Boss Lu. So close, yet worlds apart, was unleashed. Gui Yeming was about to grab Boss Lu, but he was still a hair's breadth away. What a powerful formation! Gui Yeming retracted his ghost claw and looked coldly at Mu Yu. His lips curled into a mocking smile. You want to stop me alone? Mu Yu looked at so close, yet worlds apart. This formation should have been more than enough to stop Gui Yeming, but because the Pagoda Genie had used it to stop the death aura from spreading, much of its power had been consumed by the aura. Now, the formation's power had been greatly reduced. Mu Yu could not guarantee how many times he could block Gui Yeming's attack. So, he could only use this formation on Boss Lu, while he faced the tribulation Gui Yeming alone. At least I won't let you people from the gate of hell get away with it so easily. Mu Yu held his sword horizontally in front of his chest, pointing it at Gui Yeming. What right do you have to say that? As soon as Gui Yeming finished speaking, he suddenly appeared behind Mu Yu. Ghost aura rolled out from his body, and a powerful spiritual force swept out. What incredible speed! Mu Yu had mentally prepared himself, but a tribulation Gui Yeming's cultivation was still far beyond his expectations. But the Yao Sealing Pagoda shone again, and the spirit terminating no immortal domain was moved behind him. Gui Yeming's tribulation. Gui Yeming's ghost aura disappeared without a trace after entering the spirit terminating no immortal domain. Mu Yu was not happy to be able to control the spirit terminating no immortal domain, because it had been greatly damaged. It was no longer a complete formation, so it could not exert its suppressive power. The power of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's domain? It looks like everything that happened in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda was your doing. Gui Yeming's expression darkened. Just now, he and Gui Yezi had tried to escape the death aura. But every time they reached the exit of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, something happened. It was as if they had been set up on purpose. In the end, they were trapped in the spirit terminating no immortal domain. If the formation runes hadn't been damaged, they wouldn't have been able to escape. The spirit terminating no immortal domain enveloped Mu Yu and Gui Yeming, using the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's power to forcibly trap Gui Yeming. However, Mu Yu found it very troublesome. Mu Yu was using the domain, but he was also restricted by it. So you don't have complete control over this domain. You can't completely suppress my cultivation. Gui Yeming approached Mu Yu step by step. The domain's power could no longer make them lose their cultivation. Instead, it forcefully suppressed their cultivation by an entire realm. Even so, Gui Yeming's cultivation was still higher than Mu Yu's. He was close to the 9th heavenly layer of the body integration stage, while Mu Yu was only at the out-of-body stage. He relied on He Lienkong's soul tool to forcibly raise his aura to the 1st heavenly layer of the spirit severing stage. However, after suppressing Gui Yeming's cultivation, he no longer had the terrifying pressure of a tribulation passing stage cultivator. Xiao Shui and Long Ting leapt out from Mu Yu's body and rushed out to help Xiao Shui. The two of them were also restricted by this domain. Only by leaving here to help Xiao Shui could they unleash their full power. A severed soul stage cultivator against a body integration stage cultivator? Gui Yeming didn't panic. The rules of this domain were fair to everyone. He still had the advantage. Chapter 728. Bang! Mu Yu was sent flying. He slammed into the barrier of the end spirit no immortal domain. The barrier trembled. It was on the verge of collapsing. Blood trickled down the corner of Mu Yu's mouth. The difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Mu Yu did not dare use the Mu Ling. This meant that Mu Yu could not restrain Gui Yeming's ghost aura. This allowed Gui Yeming to use his ghost techniques without restraint. After just one exchange, Mu Yu was already badly injured. But Mu Yu quickly stood up. The shadow swords hummed around him, ready to attack. Gui Yeming did not give Mu Yu any chance to catch his breath. He flashed to Mu Yu's side again. The ghost aura turned into sharp ghost awls. They were aimed at Mu Yu's vital points. Every ghost awl glowed with a dark light. These ghost awls were specifically used to attack the soul. Once the soul was frozen, Mu Yu would not be able to move. But Mu Yu waved his hand and runes floated out. They gathered before his chest to form a white rune. The white rune instantly formed a water ripple. It was like a mirror sucking in all the ghost awls. But soon, cracks appeared on the water ripple. With a splash, the water ripple shattered. All the ghost awls appeared again, heading for Mu Yu. But Mu Yu had already flashed away. The ghost awls pierced the ground, creating small holes. Wisps of black gas rose out of them. Mu Yu tapped the ground with his feet. The shadow swords in his hand carried golden runes as they charged forward. The 9 shadow swords stabbed at Gui Yeming from different angles. The horizon neighbor array made the shadow swords' trajectories illusory. They were clearly still some distance away, but in the blink of an eye, they were right in front of Gui Yeming. Humph! It's not enough for you to do that. Gui Yeming was not flustered by Mu Yu's shadow swords. The twins rushed out of his body and blocked all the shadow swords. Gui Yeming once again crossed the distance and slammed his palm into Mu Yu's chest. Bang! Mu Yu was sent flying again. My strength is still too weak. Mu Yu gritted his teeth. Even when his cultivation wasn't suppressed, it was still very difficult for him to defend against a body integration stage cultivator's attack. Even if Gui Yeming's cultivation was suppressed, he was still several times stronger than Gui Shifei. At this moment, Mu Yu did not have any extravagant hopes of killing Gui Yeming. He only needed to stall for time. Looking through the array, Boss Lu's face was flushed red. Gui Yezi's angry roars could still be heard from time to time. Mu Yu wasn't sure if Boss Lu would succeed, but he had to take a gamble. It's not a good time to be distracted during a fight. Gui Yeming attacked Mu Yu again. Mu Yu was once again slammed into the barrier of the domain. Gui Yeming, what are you doing? Hurry up and kill that demon. Gui Yezi's angry voice rang out again. Gui Yeming's body stopped in midair. He snorted coldly. Kid, I'll deal with you later. As he spoke, Gui Yeming had already formed a blood-red spear. The spear reeked of blood, as if it had been soaked in the blood of thousands of people. The spear turned into a long rainbow and slammed into the barrier of the spirit terminating no immortal domain. Bang! The entire spirit terminating no immortal domain trembled violently. The power of the domain was actually disrupted. Bang! The second spear thrust. A small crack appeared on the surface of the domain. Bang! The third spear thrust, and the crack began to spread. The entire domain was on the verge of collapse. Damn it, we have to stop him. Mu Yu struggled to get up from the ground. The array formation domain was already in tatters. Now that it was being attacked by Gui Yeming, it was reaching its limit. With Mu Yu's familiarity with this domain, he was certain that the domain would not be able to withstand Gui Yeming's fifth attack. Bang! The fourth spear thrust, and the domain's barrier was on the verge of collapse. However, it was still suppressing their cultivation levels. I've said it before. Your opponent is me. Mu Yu shouted coldly. The shadow clone sword in his hand had already changed color. The blade was white with black sword runes. A ferocious aura rolled out from Mu Yu's hand, covering Mu Yu's entire body. A cold feeling swept through Mu Yu's mind once more. The aura of slaughter flowed through his body. He felt as if he had transformed into a god of slaughter, the ruler of all life in the world. The murderous intent that looked down on all life made his blood boil. Gui Yeming's spear thrust forward again, but this time, the spear did not touch the barrier. Instead, it was stopped by a white sword tip. Kid, you're looking for. Gui Yeming impatiently turned his head. He wanted to kill Mu Yu, but he was met with Mu Yu's strange eyes. Gui Yeming's heart skipped a beat. Even someone like him, who had killed countless people, felt his heart palpitate. Mu Yu's eyes no longer resembled those of a normal person. His eyes had completely transformed into a black and white aura. Each eye was like a black and white aura that spun around each other, forming the shape of a yin-yang fish. The aura of slaughter pulsed through Mu Yu's body. He was like a demon that had emerged from the depths of hell. His entire body was covered in a terrifying aura of blood. Ding! Mu Ling's sword easily repelled Gui Yeming's spear. The white blade emitted a pure aura of death that absorbed all the blood and ghostly aura on the spear. Crash! Gui Yeming looked at his blood-colored spear in disbelief. It seemed as if its spiritual energy had been sucked dry by something. It had lost its blood-colored luster. With just a bit of force, it broke into several pieces and fell to the ground. What? Gui Yeming was furious. This spear had been refined with countless blood souls. It had been nourished by his tribulation stage cultivation. It had long reached an indestructible state. However, Mu Yu's strange sword had just touched it and it had turned into a pile of scrap metal? Kid, you dare destroy my magic treasure! Gui Yeming was furious, but the aura of slaughter emanating from Mu Ling's sword shocked him. To be honest, with his tribulation stage cultivation, he had killed no less than 10,000 self-cultivators. However, his aura of slaughter was not as terrifying as this. Just how many people had Mu Ling's sword killed? Not only will I destroy your magic treasure, but I will also kill you. Mu Yu slowly opened his mouth. His voice was like ice that had not melted in 1,000 years. Every word contained a cold killing intent. Even someone like Gui Yeming, who had been tainted by countless resentful souls, felt his hair stand on end. This was a killing intent that could only be obtained after experiencing the slaughter of tens of thousands of people. However, Mu Yu was Jian Ying Chen Feng's disciple. How could he have killed so many people? What Gui Yeming did not know was that Mu Ling's aura of slaughter came from the tens of thousands of flesh-winged horned monsters. The flesh-winged horned monsters were extremely powerful. They were also ferocious and terrifying creatures. Their life force was extremely tenacious. The life force of a flesh-winged horned monster was equivalent to the life force of several hundred self-cultivators. When all the flesh-winged horned monsters were devoured by the aura of death and life, and Mu Ling devoured the aura of death and life, it was equivalent to creating an endless slaughter. Insolence! Die! Gui Yeming roared. Ghost fog once again rose from his body. The ghost fog turned into a sinister ghost claw that grabbed at Mu Yu. This claw still had the power of a 9th heavenly layer body fusion stage cultivator. If a mountain was in front of him, it would be easily shattered. Mu Yu's expression was cold. The aura of death continuously flowed from Mu Ling's sword into Mu Yu's body. His cultivation was actually increasing step by step. The strength of his body was also increasing. When Gui Yeming's ghost claw was about to reach him, a black and white aura surged out of his body and met the ghost claw. When the insufferably arrogant ghost claw met the black and white auras, it rapidly withered and dissipated like snow. It was as if it had evaporated into thin air, leaving not a single trace behind. Gui Yeming's eyes widened. He never thought that his sure kill attack would be so weak in front of Mu Yu. How did Mu Yu, who couldn't beat him in the beginning, become so strong all of a sudden? What on earth had happened to him? After Mu Ling's sword absorbed the aura of death and life force, its aura was the natural nemesis of evil things like ghost aura. When that seemingly incomparably powerful ghost claw came into contact with Mu Ling's aura, it couldn't maintain its form at all. It was inevitable that it would be shattered. Mu Yu's aura was still rising. When the aura of death entered his body, it could actually strengthen his cultivation. He enjoyed this process very much. The spiritual energy in his body seemed to be resonating with Mu Ling's sword, circulating faster and faster. In just a few breaths, Mu Yu's strength had reached the first heavenly layer body fusion stage. Life and death are all under my control. Mu Yu seemed to be pronouncing Gui Yeming's death sentence. Every word struck Gui Yeming's heart, causing him to be extremely terrified. Gui Yeming no longer hesitated. He knew that if he continued to be trapped in this spirit no immortal domain, he would become a soul under Mu Yu's sword sooner or later. He immediately turned around, raised all the strength in his body, and blasted at the crack in the domain barrier. But when he turned around, Mu Ling's sword was like a ghost. It materialized from the runes in the void and slashed down at Gui Yeming's arm. Chi! A severed arm wrapped in ghost aura flew through the air, sprinkling dark red blood. It was a ghastly sight. Ah! Gui Yeming let out a heart-wrenching scream. If it was just a severed arm, he wouldn't have felt such pain. The reason he couldn't endure this pain was because he felt that the arm on his soul had also been severed. That's right. It was a wound to the soul. As a member of the Gate of Hell who dealt with souls all year round, Gui Yeming couldn't be more familiar with soul wounds. Not only did this sword cut off his physical arm, it also cut off his soul arm. Chapter 729. How can you have such a vicious sword technique? Gui Yeming's eyes were filled with panic. He was a tribulation passing stage cultivator. It was one thing for him to be suppressed to the ninth firmament of the body integration stage, but he couldn't even defeat someone at the first firmament of the body integration stage. Vicious sword technique? How can you say something like that? Mu Yu said coldly. People from the Devil's Gate killed people and extracted their souls, causing them to never be able to reincarnate. There were countless spells that targeted the soul. With such intolerable spells, how could he still have the nerve to say that other people's sword techniques were vicious? One less person from the gate of hell is one less scourge in the world. Mu Yu's consciousness was very clear. He could control the death aura that entered his body. He could remember everything. The only difference was that his emotions were suppressed. His state of mind was calm. There was only life and death in his mind. The pain in his soul caused Gui Yeming's face to turn pale. He forced himself to suppress the pain. This was not an easy task. The pain in his soul made him feel like he didn't want to die. In addition, Gui Yeming's cultivation was being suppressed. He was thinking that he had to leave this domain. Don't be too arrogant. Even though Gui Yeming had lost an arm, he still raised his other hand and smashed it at the crack in the domain barrier. As long as he could escape from this broken domain, he would be able to recover his cultivation. Even if he was heavily injured, he would be able to kill Mu Yu. At this time, Mu Ling's sword followed him like a shadow and chopped down at his remaining arm. This time, he was prepared. He retracted his arm in the air and avoided the danger of losing another arm. Spiritual energy gathered in his feet. He turned around and kicked the broken part of the domain barrier. Boom! The barrier once again erupted with a soul-stirring tremor. The entire barrier shook. The aura of the outside world had already drilled in through the cracks and quickly spread out. The terrifying suppression had also gradually disappeared. Gui Yeming's transcending tribulation stage cultivation had returned to him. Break! Gui Yeming roared and shattered the broken domain into dust. But his waist was still hit by Mu Ling's sword at the last moment. A deep wound appeared on Gui Yeming's body. The wounds on his body were secondary. It was the wounds on his soul that made Gui Yeming's body tremble uncontrollably. He had always been the one to hurt the souls of others. This time, he finally experienced what it meant to hurt the soul. Brat, you broke my arm. This time, I want you dead. Gui Yeming's tribulation passing stage aura once again assaulted Mu Yu's body. After breaking free from the spiritless no immortal domain, Gui Yeming heaved a sigh of relief. Even if he lost an arm, he could still crush Mu Yu to death with a single slap with his tribulation passing stage cultivation. But when he looked at Mu Yu, his eyes narrowed. That was because Mu Yu's cultivation had risen to the peak of the ninth heavenly layer. The disappearance of the spiritless no immortal domain allowed Gui Yeming to return to the tribulation passing stage. But it also allowed Mu Yu to reach the body integration stage. Originally, he could rely on He Lienkong's soul armament to forcefully raise his cultivation to the body integration stage. After gaining control of the power of slaughter, Mu Yu's cultivation rose to the peak of the ninth heavenly layer. He was only a step away from the tribulation passing stage. Although his aura was only at the ninth heavenly layer, the baleful aura on his body was far stronger than an ordinary ninth heavenly layer. At this moment, Gui Yeming's soul was incomplete. He was suffering from unbearable pain. The wounds on his arms and waist were bleeding non-stop. The strange aura of Mu Ling's sword specifically targeted the ghostly aura on Gui Yeming's face. The aura of slaughter invaded Gui Yeming's body, causing him to feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He couldn't even circulate the ghostly aura in his body freely. Mu Ling's sword rippled in the air and returned to Mu Yu's hand. His brows were tightly knitted. The desire for slaughter was running rampant in his body, spreading to every inch of his meridians. He deeply liked this kind of power. Mu Ling's killing intent was very strong. Mu Yu's killing intent was also very strong. I don't mind adding you to the list of people I want to kill, Muyu said coldly. The tip of his sword slashed out again. The black and white sword chi intertwined in the air and chased after Gui Yeming. Gui Yeming was shocked to find that the two sword intents that Muyu had sent out were actually a threat to him. This was impossible in the past. Ever since he entered the crossing tribulation stage, no other body integration stage cultivator could enter his eyes. But now, he could really smell the scent of death. Bastard, don't look down on me. Gui Yeming's cultivation technique was too restrained. But after all, he was a famous crossing tribulation stage expert. His strength couldn't be underestimated. In addition, the speed and reaction of a crossing tribulation stage cultivator were relatively strong. He had already launched a counterattack. Gui Yeming's body dispersed, turning into a ghostly mist that filled the sky. At this moment, a blood-red bead floated out of the ghostly mist. This bead seemed to contain an independent world. Upon closer inspection, one could see mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. It was as if there was an azure world inside. The bloodly bead was refined in a place with extremely dense yin qi. It was a very terrifying ghost tool. Anyone who came into contact with it would turn into a pool of blood in the blink of an eye. Even their soul would be sucked into this bead. As soon as the bloodly bead appeared, the whole sky became oppressive. The sea breeze blew, mixed with a gloomy chill. The dark clouds in the sky began to gather, and soon formed the shape of a dark green skull. The skull's mouth was actually spitting out a black ghost python that was several hundred meters tall. The ghost python suddenly hissed and pounced towards Muyu. Wherever the ghost python went, the yin wind howled and ghost chi burst out. There seemed to be pitch-black cracks in the air. Those were the afterimages left behind when the air was compressed to the extreme. The ghost python arrived in the blink of an eye and opened its bloody mouth. The python's mouth was like a pitch-black cave. It seemed that nothing on the demon island could escape from that mouth. On the demon island, except for Gui Yezi and Boss Lu, everyone had stopped. The black ghost python used by Gui Yeming covered the sky and the sun. A terrifying pressure swept over everyone. Even Gui Yeming and Gui Leopard retreated far away, not daring to be affected by this huge ghost python. At this time, only the thin and tall figure was left in the sky. He held a black and white longsword in his hand and faced the ghost python alone. The chilly wind blew at the hem of Muyu's clothes. His entire person became incomparably fierce, like a proud and aloof sword. In front of the monstrous ghost pythons, his figure suddenly seemed so tall and mighty. The world seemed to revolve with him as the center. All the yin wind was no longer blowing. Instead, it revolved around him. Countless green leaves floated in from nowhere. They were full of vitality but also contained endless killing intent. Muyu moved. The sword in his hand slashed through the air and suddenly divided into 9 swords. The 9 swords in the air began to evolve the 9 sword moves of the Heaven Sword 9 Guide. The 9 sword moves were exquisite and domineering. Each sword move contained an incomparably biting cold sword chi. The sword chi overflowed in the air and formed 2 primordial yin and yang chi, one black and one white. Then, they chased and converged in front of him. At that moment, the 9 swords finally merged into one and then suddenly stabbed out. The swords stabbed into the yin and yang chi in front of Muyu. The yin and yang chi suddenly chased faster and faster, forming a black and white vortex. When the vortex spun to the limit, it suddenly separated and turned into a black and white longsword. The black longsword had a white edge and the white longsword had a black edge. They entangled and separated from each other, winding and spiraling, but with an incomparably terrifying sword chi and killing intent. They directly met the monstrous ghost python in the sky. Boom! The entire demon island shook as if there was a huge earthquake. The yin and yang sword chi instantly tore the ghost python apart. The insufferably arrogant ghost python was unable to withstand a single blow from the yin and yang sword chi. The blood phantasm bead was also invaded by the two different sword chi. With a bang, it exploded into fragments that filled the sky. The yin and yang sword chi didn't lose their momentum and continued to tremble as they blasted towards Gui Yeming. At this moment, Gui Yeming was completely unable to react. When he saw the yin and yang sword chi, that was the last thing he would see in this world. A 2-finger-thick wound appeared on Gui Yeming's forehead. No blood flowed out of the wound, but it was filled with the yin and yang chi. The sword chi didn't rush out from the back of his head but instead sank into his body. Gui Yeming didn't let out any scream. His entire body was already unable to move. His skin suddenly turned black and white, constantly changing. Finally, as if it was being decomposed, his entire body turned into fine powder that filled the sky and was swallowed by the yin and yang sword chi. Even his soul couldn't escape. The yin and yang sword chi soared into the sky, shattering the dark clouds that gathered above the demon island. The sun shone on the demon island once again, and then the sword chi spiraled back into Mu Ling's sword. The killing intent on Mu Ling's sword grew stronger by a notch. Lord Ghost King is dead? Gui Leopard, who retreated, swallowed a mouthful of saliva and looked at all this in disbelief. That was a crossing calamity stage Ghost King, one of the few crossing calamity stage experts in the Gate of Hell. Usually, no one dared to provoke His Majesty. Even in the cultivation world, he had an illustrious reputation. But this Lord Ghost King who they usually revered was actually dead? Gui Shiming was also shocked. Even if he fused with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, he was far from being a match for Gui Yeming. At most, he wouldn't die for 7 days. But who would have thought that Mu Yu, whose cultivation was lower than his, could kill Gui Yeming? That terrifying killing intent even made Gui Shiming's heart palpitate. He knew that he couldn't resist it. The remaining 2 demon race members were also shocked. They looked at each other. They thought that today would be a bitter battle, but they didn't expect that Mu Yu, whose cultivation was only at the 9th layer of spirit severing stage, could directly kill a crossing calamity stage expert from the Gate of Hell. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. So this is the power of killing? Mu Yu's desire to kill rose again. He wanted to continue creating endless killing for the Mu Ling sword to strengthen himself. Only then could he become stronger and do what he wanted to do. The power of killing made him infatuated. He looked at the demon race members and the people from the Gate of Hell in the distance. He clenched the Mu Ling sword in his hand again. He wanted to use the people from the Gate of Hell to create more killing. This time, Mu Yu was sure that even the Blood Realm Devil Puppet couldn't maintain its immortal body under the power of life and death. But at this moment, a sense of powerlessness suddenly came from his body. The black and white spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been sucked dry. The spiritual energy in his meridians was like gossamer and couldn't maintain his aura anymore. Is my energy exhausted? Then his consciousness began to blur. He couldn't stir up any spiritual energy in his body. His whole body fell down. Although the power of killing was strong, this power was far from what Mu Yu could control. His cultivation couldn't support this strong power at all. The spiritual energy in his body had been exhausted. However, at this time, Gui Shiming, who only had one head, had appeared below Mu Yu. The ghost fog turned into a blood-red long axe. With a sharp whistling sound, it ruthlessly smashed towards Mu Yu's chest. Chapter 730. Stop! Qiao Shui roared furiously as she flew up and stood in front of Mu Yu, forcefully resisting Gui Ximing's attack. The water spirit coiled around Mu Yu and came into contact with the wood spirit sword. However, right at this moment, the energy of slaughter actually flowed along the water spirit and surged into Qiao Shui's body. That terrifying energy caused Xiao Shui's mind to be in chaos, as if someone was stirring her body. In an instant, a strange blue light appeared in Xiao Shui's eyes, and boundless murderous energy suddenly emerged from her body. Unlike Mu Yu, Xiao Shui didn't maintain her consciousness in this murderous energy. She seemed to have lost herself. She was like an ice beauty, standing in the air, so cold that people couldn't approach her. This murderous energy didn't belong to Xiao Shui, so she couldn't maintain her consciousness in this murderous energy. Just like how Mu Yu couldn't maintain his consciousness in the first place, Xiao Shui was also affected by Mu Yu's murderous energy. Icebound 1,000 miles. With a cold shout, the air of the entire demon island seemed to have solidified at a certain moment. Drops of water turned into icicles, snowflakes began to flutter, and the temperature suddenly dropped. It was as if the hottest days of summer had directly entered the cold winter. Everyone felt that their blood was about to freeze. Xiao Shui's whole body was covered with blue light. With the help of Mu Yu's murderous energy, her cultivation soared rapidly. Countless ice crystals instantly surrounded Gui Xiexie. Ghosts cherished their lives. Even though they had killed countless people, under such a low temperature, they were still threatened. Blood souls emerged from his body and bombarded the ice crystal, tearing a hole in the ice crystal. His head turned into a blood shadow and rushed out. However, his blood souls did not move in the air. They were frozen by the terrifying low temperature. Xiao Shui's 1,000 miles of ice was simply too terrifying. Gui Zhenming had already experienced it once, so he didn't dare to receive it a second time. But with Xiao Shui's current physical condition, using the 1,000 miles of ice would cause her body to be ravaged by the low temperature. Without the help of Spirit Lord Shui Yumeng, Xiao Shui's usage of this ability was equivalent to harming herself while harming others. Her skin began to turn into ice crystals, and her entire body was gradually being eaten away by the ice crystals. These ice crystals had already covered Mu Yu's body. Mu Yu was already severely injured, and he could not circulate any spiritual energy in his body. At this moment, he could not resist this terrible cold. His body temperature was rapidly dropping, and his life was in danger. Xiao Shui, you're going to hurt Mu Yu even more. Little Shui had already leaped over. A sharp blade as thin as a cicada's wing popped out of its little hand. It drew a thin ray of light in the air and destroyed all the ice crystals in front of it. Then, it turned into a white light and jumped onto Mu Yu. "Don't stop me from killing," Xiao Shui said emotionlessly. She raised her hand and chopped down at Little Shui, sending out a cold current. This killing intent belonged to Mu Yu, not Xiao Shui. After coming into contact with this killing intent, Xiao Shui would completely lose herself, unable to retain her consciousness. In her heart there was only killing intent, and there was no distinction between friend and foe. She would not even let Little Shui off. "This killing intent does not belong to you, quickly wake up," Little Shui shouted in a childish voice. Its fluffy tail swung about, dispersing the cold current around it. Its sharp claws reached out towards the water spirit. The water spirit's temperature was extremely low at this moment, but Little Shui was not afraid at all. With a swipe of its claws, it separated the water spirit and Mu Ling. Shua! That murderous aura suddenly disappeared like melting snow. It was quickly absorbed into the wood spirit, and the wood spirit turned back into a black and white flying sword. The water spirit also returned to its docile and lively appearance, gently floating in the air. However, the auras between them were still resonating with each other, as if they could not wait to be reunited. "Who?" Xiao Shui suddenly let out a long breath as she stared at the water spirit in surprise. The killing intent in her body that had caused her to lose control gradually dissipated, and the ice crystals in the air began to melt, causing the temperature to rise again. "What happened just now? What did I do?" Xiao Shui's chest heaved up and down as a look of panic appeared on her face, completely different from the cold and decisive person she had just been. It's nothing, you accidentally touched Mu Yu's killing intent. That killing intent belongs to Mu Yu, you can't control it, it's none of your business. Little Shuai grabbed Mu Yu's clothes and pulled him away from the battlefield. Qiao Shui followed closely behind, a lingering fear filling her heart. Although she had lost consciousness, at that moment, her heart had been filled with infinite killing intent. This feeling still lingered in her mind. What was going on with that kind of power? Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard did not dare to act rashly. Mu Yu had suddenly killed Gui Yiming. This kind of strange ability was far beyond their imagination. Moreover, Qiao Shui's power was exactly the same as Mu Yu's. It was not something these two people from the Gate of Hell could contend against. Boss Lu was still fighting with Gui Yezi. At this moment, Boss Lu's entire body was covered in blood, the blood even seeping out of his skin. However, the blood did not soak his clothes, but instead flowed rapidly through his body, constantly merging with the totem in front of him. The light of the totem grew brighter and brighter, and Gui Yezi's roars became more and more hurried. He could no longer completely suppress the Sea Goblin King. What are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and stop them. Gui Yezi also noticed that Gui Yiming had been killed, but he did not have time to be shocked because he could not even protect himself. The Sea Goblin King had been struggling to break free from his control, but he was bound by Boss Lu's demonic technique, so he could only shout at Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard. Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard looked at each other. They had no other choice but to bite the bullet and rush toward Qiao Shui and the others again. They did not know the source of the power, so they were still very afraid of Qiao Shui. Long Yeli and Yi Wenmao also went up, transformed into their powerful bodies, and fought with the two people from the Gate of Hell. Little Shui, take care of Mu Yu. Qiao Shui tiptoed and rejoined the battlefield. Ing Yu and Long Ting also circled in the air, fighting fiercely with the two people from the Gate of Hell. However, without the killing power, Qiao Shui could no longer threaten Gui Shiming and Gui Leopard. Gui Shiming and the others obviously realized this, and their attacks became more and more fierce, once again gaining the upper hand. Let me see, Spirit Restoring Pill, Spirit Consolidating Pill, these are useless. How can the black and white spiritual power in your body be exhausted? Little Shui checked Mu Yu's injuries. At this time, Mu Yu's spiritual power had dried up. Originally, his body had an endless supply of black and white spiritual power, but it was all drained. Mu Yu's cultivation had returned to the 9th celestial layer of spirit severing stage. Mu Yu originally had two kinds of spiritual power, one black and one white, chasing each other in his dantian, and then flowing through his body. However, at this time, the black and white qi in his dantian seemed to have lost their power. They slowly rotated listlessly, unable to quickly recover the lost spiritual power. Right, myriad arts regression. Pagoda spirit, pagoda spirit. Little Shui knocked on Mu Yu's body. A hazy and blurry beautiful figure flew out of Mu Yu's body. She stopped in the air, but her eyes looked very confused. Who are you? Are you calling me? After the suppressing demon tower was continuously damaged, her memory had become more and more blurred. She even forgot to see Little Shui once. It doesn't matter who I am. The suppressing demon tower has the domain power left by immortal Xian Jizi. Can you use this power on Mu Yu? Little Shui said quickly. Myriad Arts Regression Domain? What's that? The pagoda spirit had actually forgotten this. Why are you even more stupid than me? No, I'm wrong. I'm not stupid. Why are you so stupid? He's your master now. You need to help him recover the lost spiritual power in his body. Little Shui said as he pointed at Mu Yu. Lost spiritual power? Won't it slowly recover on its own? The pagoda spirit asked in confusion. You didn't forget that. He can't recover his spiritual power in this state. On top of that, Qiao Shui's 1,000 miles of ice just now has worsened his internal injuries. Hurry up and help him. Little Shui urged urgently. What do I need to do? Myriad Arts Regression. You're the pagoda spirit. You must have some of Xian Jizi's domain power left behind. Oh. The pagoda spirit stretched out her slender hand. A white light appeared in her hand, and the power of the domain rolled out from her hand. It touched Mu Yu's dantian. Return to origin could restore everything to its original state. The pagoda spirit didn't have much of the domain power left. However, because Mu Yu was the master of the suppressing demon tower, this little bit of domain power was still useful to Mu Yu. The black and white qi in Mu Yu's dantian began to circulate faster. One black and one white spiritual power finally emerged from his dantian and flowed through Mu Yu's body. Although this spiritual power was very small, it still gradually stabilized Mu Yu's weak breathing, and the meridians in his body began to be filled with the spiritual power of the black pen. The spiritual power flowed through Mu Yu's body, wrapping around every part of Mu Yu's body. In the battle with Gui Yeming, his body was severely injured. At this moment, the black spiritual power was constantly devouring his wounds. The white spiritual power was gradually healing his damaged meridians and flesh. Mu Yu's body once again felt the pain of being bitten by 10,000 ants. Every time the black spiritual power devoured him, he would feel excruciating pain. He endured it while unconscious, but his aura was gradually recovering. His true cultivation was actually only at the 9th layer of the spirit severing stage. He had always relied on Helian Kong's soul armament to reach the body integration stage. However, at this moment, the black and white spiritual power in his body was constantly washing through his meridians. The black and white qi in his dantian was also constantly expanding. His entire dantian was also undergoing earth-shattering changes. His dantian was no longer purely a place to store and produce spiritual power. On the contrary, it had become a black and white mist. It was like two pure auras in the primordial chaos. They entangled with each other and fought for territory. Neither was willing to submit to the other and wanted to suppress the other. Mu Yu's meridians were constantly expanding. Then he felt like something in his body had suddenly combined together. A majestic and powerful force emerged from his body. This was the power of the body integration stage. He had already broken through to the body integration stage. However, this force was still growing. It was like a tide that had been squeezed for a long time and couldn't wait to be released. His whole body was like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon, surging rapidly. The spiritual power between heaven and earth also swept towards him frantically. He was like a powerful vortex, sucking all the spiritual power on the demon island. 1. Chapter 731. Everyone was attracted by the commotion on Mu Yu's side. The moment Gui Shiming saw Mu Yu, his expression changed drastically. Mu Yu's original cultivation was only at the 9th celestial layer of spirit severing stage. It was enough to compete with him by relying on his soul weapon. This time, after breaking through to the combination stage, He Lienkong's soul weapon would make him even more powerful. You must die. Gui Shiming saw that Mu Yu was still breaking through. He couldn't let Mu Yu continue to cultivate. Now that Gui Yeming was dead, and Gui Yezi was entangled by Boss Lu's demonic art, if Mu Yu fully recovered, then today's plan would probably end in failure. Gui Shiming's strength was still higher than Qiao Shui and the others. The blood-field demon puppet made him very terrifying. At this time, Qiao Shui didn't have the blessing of slaughter power, so she was no match for Gui Shiming at all. Gui Shiming and Gui Bao worked together to force Qiao Shui, Yiwen Mao, and Long Yeli back, and once again slashed at Mu Yu. It was too late for Qiao Shui to stop at this time. Gui Shiming's speed was too fast. The ghost fog instantly enveloped Mu Yu's entire body. Xiao Shuai shouted and rushed over, wanting to block Gui Shiming, but Gui Shiming swept heavily. The ghost aura turned into a big hand and smashed Xiao Shuai away. This time, let's see who will save you. Gui Shiming showed a vicious smile, and the blood-colored long axe appeared in the air and slashed down. But a hand suddenly grabbed Gui Shiming's blood-colored long axe directly, so that the bloody axe couldn't move forward anymore. Gui Shiming, it's time to settle the score between us. Mu Yu's eyes flashed with two lights, one black and one white. The murderous aura swept out again, shattering the billowing ghost aura and blasted at Gui Shiming. The black and white Mu Ling appeared in the air, and the strong murderous intent had already locked onto Gui Shiming. This time, Mu Yu wanted to completely destroy Gui Shiming. Gui Shiming angrily roared. He condensed a ghost hand to block Mu Yu's aura, but that aura was like an unstoppable force. It tyrannically penetrated the ghost hand and swept towards Gui Shiming's head. Gui Shiming felt as if his head was hit by a mountain. His whole head was stunned for a moment, and at the same time, his head was uncontrollably sent flying and crashed on the demon island, creating a 100-meter-wide crater on the ground. How is that possible? Gui Shiming was furious. His voice trembled as he recalled that even Gui Yeming, who was at the crossing calamity stage, had been killed by Mu Yu. Even if he had fused with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, he was still far from being a match for Mu Yu. Ghosts cherish their lives. Your life is about to come to an end. Mu Yu held Helion Kong's soul tool in his hand. Powerful soul force was continuously channeled into his body. At the same time, the Yao Ceiling Pagoda also flickered with light from time to time, making his aura even stronger. The black and white auras intertwined in the air, turning into two sharp sword rays. They crisscrossed and slashed towards Gui Shiming. Gui Shiming quickly flew out of the crater. Countless blood mists were stirred up in front of him. He wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape, but these blood mists had already disappeared the moment they were hit by the black and white sword rays. There was no room for resistance at all. Boom! The black and white sword rays once again slashed on Gui Shiming's head. A crack actually appeared on Gui Shiming's head. The appearance of this crack also completely destroyed the last of Gui Shiming's confidence. One had to know that the Blood Realm Devil Puppet was an extremely vicious thing in the Gate of Hell. It only had a lifespan of 7 days, but it was extremely powerful. It was an indestructible existence. At that time, Xiao Shuai's sharp claws split open Gui Shiming's head, but Gui Shiming fused back together without leaving a single scar. But this time, the crack that appeared on Gui Shiming's head was actually unable to heal. There has never been an absolute defense in this world. Mu Yu coldly shouted, and the black and white sword light once again chopped on Gui Ximing's head, and this time Gui Ximing didn't even have the chance to fight back, and a crack appeared on his head again. Within the crack, there was a faint manic black sword aura and a surging white sword aura. They constantly invaded the entire bone, preventing the Blood Realm Devil Puppet from healing. How can you invade my head? Impossible! Impossible! The Blood Realm Devil Puppet cannot be defeated. Gui Shiming roared crazily. He formed a ghost hand and wanted to force the black and white sword rays out. However, the two sword rays had already hidden themselves in his head. They rampaged and smashed the brain and blood inside. Gui Shiming wailed in pain. He let out a heart-wrenching roar. He felt that his entire head was about to explode. A pain that was worse than death appeared on his head. Originally, after Gui Shiming merged with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, his entire head was only left with bloody blood vessels. There was not a single piece of intact skin. At this time, the black and white sword rays invaded his head. The black and white sword aura kept bursting out from the blood vessels on his head. I am not reconciled. Gui Shiming let out a final scream. his eyes suddenly emitted black and white sword aura. Not only that, his 7 orifices were already filled with powerful sword aura. His brain matter was like a fountain. Even his mouth was filled with sword aura. He could no longer make a sound. The biting cold black and white sword aura swept across Gui Shiming's face. It took away all his flesh and blood. His soul contained in the blood realm devil puppet was also crushed by the black and white sword aura. A moment later, his entire head had completely turned into a cracked black skull. In the end, Gui Shiming died under Mu Yu's sword aura. The blood realm devil puppet had incomparably powerful defensive ability. However, the slaughter power in Mu Yu's hand was filled with awe-inspiring killing intent. It invaded Gui Shiming's head and completely destroyed him. After losing Gui Shiming as its host, the blood realm devil puppet rolled on the ground and became ordinary. It looked like a black skull without the slightest bit of flesh. There were also shocking cracks on it. It could be blown into a pile of bone fragments by the wind at any time. The slaughter power was still swaying in the air and spread all over Mu Yu's body. Mu Yu coldly glanced at Ghost Leopard, causing him to feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Even Gui Shiming and Gui Yiming had died, so Ghost Leopard was definitely not Mu Yu's opponent. You should also accompany Gui Shiming and Gui Shiming. Mu Yu's voice was like the king of hell, pronouncing Gui Shiming's death. Gui Shiming did not hesitate to turn around and run away from the demon island. But when he ran to the seaside, he was horrified to realize that he could not leave the demon island. Although the subduing demon pagoda was damaged, the powerful imprisoning power still spread all over the demon island. Gui Shiming did not have the blood realm devil soul like Gui Shiming. He could not get out. At this time, Mu Yu's black and white sword aura descended like a death god. It directly poured into Gui Shiming's body from the top of his head, destroying his life force in an instant. It was too late for his soul to escape. Bang! Ghost Leopard's body fell straight to the ground. The moment it fell to the ground, it had already broken into pieces like a clay figurine. All of the spiritual power in its body had disappeared, as if it had been forcefully sucked dry by something. The sea breeze slightly blew Gui Shiming's body into a pile of powder and turned into yellow soil. But the slaughter did not stop. Mu Yu's heart was incomparably calm. He had his own consciousness and knew what he was doing. But the desire to slaughter in his heart was still not quelled. At this moment, he seemed to have no friend or foe, only slaughter. He turned his gaze to Qiao Shui and the others. He knew that Qiao Shui was with him, so he forcibly restrained the urge to kill Qiao Shui. Instead, he stared at Long Yeli and Yiwen Mao. Long Yeli and Yiwen Mao had helped Long Xingyun to frame him. This time, he did not intend to let these two people go. The black and white sword aura intertwined in the air and fell toward Long Yeli and Yiwen Mao. Long Yeli and Yiwen Mao's faces changed drastically. They were almost scared out of their wit. Mu Yu, who had the power of slaughter, looked like a killing god. He was so powerful that they could not have any desire to live. They could only wait for death. However, little Shui had already jumped back at this time. He knew that Mu Yu had fallen into that power. Even if he did not lose consciousness, it caused him to become very bloodthirsty. The longer he fell into this power, the worse it would be for Mu Yu. Mu Yu, withdraw that power. Can you hear what I'm saying? You can't be controlled by the power of slaughter now. Otherwise, you will become emotionless in the future. Have you forgotten that you still have to resurrect Deadwood Daddy? Little Shui shouted in a childish voice. At the same time, the shadow clone sword flew out from nowhere and instantly met the two black and white sword auras in the air. Deadwood Daddy, Mu Yu's heart was touched. He remembered everything very clearly. His feelings for Deadwood Daddy were also vivid in his mind. He also remembered what the power of slaughter represented. Crack the ninth heaven sealing demon formation, merge with Gomong, and lead the entire Yuman. However, he could not choose to accept this power of slaughter now. The ninth heaven sealing demon formation in Mu Yu's body seemed to be flashing faintly, transforming into an uncontrollable state. The ninth heaven sealing demon formation was originally engraved in his soul. Mu Yu had never sensed the formation's existence. However, the murderous aura allowed him to sense the ninth heaven sealing demon formation's existence. The runes of the ninth heaven sealing demon formation also began to tremble, and those runes seemed to be annihilating. Little Shuai, seal this power. Mu Yu's voice was very calm. He knew what he had to do. The shadow clone sword had already swallowed the two white sword auras and fell into Mu Yu's hand. Mu Ling gradually left Mu Yu's hand and floated in the air. The shadow clone sword trembled, and a gentle aura instantly isolated the cold power of slaughter from Mu Yu's body. The power of slaughter is too terrifying. Mu Yu finally recovered his emotions. Although the power of slaughter was strong, it also suppressed all of his emotions. If a person had no emotions and was only left with slaughter, then they would undoubtedly be a tool. He gently shook his head. Even though he had the cultivation of the body integration stage, there was still a trace of murderous aura in his body that was difficult to erase. Mu Ling, who was beside him, seemed to have a pulse. Mu Yu could still feel the murderous aura on Mu Ling's body. It's still too much for you to use this power now. Little Shuai sealed Mu Ling back into the shadow clone sword, isolating it from Mu Yu. Only in this way could Mu Yu not be affected by Mu Ling's slaughter. When using the power of slaughter, Mu Yu actually enjoyed the pleasure of slaughter. However, Mu Yu had to force himself to hate it because he knew very well that once he completely accepted this power, he would no longer be himself. Is there anything wrong with the ninth heaven sealing demon formation in your body? Little Shuai asked hesitantly. Chapter 732. Mu Yu shook his head. I haven't broken the balance yet, but if I use it a few more times, I'm afraid the balance of the 5 elements will be broken. Breaking the balance of the 5 elements was something that Mu Yu had been working hard on for the past few years. But now that he had experienced the horror of the killing power, he was no longer in a hurry. That was because killing suppressed his emotions. He was worried that if he lost himself in the killing, he would forget his original intention of reviving Deadwood's father. Xiao Shui landed beside Mu Yu and asked with concern, Mu Yu, are you okay? I'm fine, but you, when I was unconscious, you were accidentally affected by my slaughter energy. Mu Yu didn't remember this matter very clearly, but when Mu Ling and Shui Ling came in contact, their minds would become connected, so Mu Yu vaguely knew what happened. Xiao Shui nodded, a complicated look on her face. I don't like that kind of power. That power was really terrifying, and Xiao Shui still had some lingering fear when thinking about it. Mu Yu nodded. In the future, Shui Ling and Mu Ling can't come in contact with each other casually. My slaughter energy can only stay awake when I use it. You won't be able to stay awake when you use it. You may need this power in the future, which means... Xiao Shui nodded. I know, it means I also need to obtain this power, right? Mu Yu was silent. Before coming to the Demon Beast Island, Old Treehead had already explained the situation to him. If they wanted to lead Yuman, they must first obtain Yuman's approval, and the most important thing was to obtain their own slaughter energy. Now, Mu Yu had obtained his own slaughter energy by devouring countless flesh-winged horned monsters, but Xiao Shui hadn't. If the 3 heavy palaces instigated Yuman to go to war with the human race in the future, the 5 of them would decide the direction of the war. Don't be too depressed, the boat will cross the bridge when it comes to it, Xiao Shui said indifferently. Now we have to think of a way to help Boss Lu. As Mu Yu spoke, he turned his attention to Boss Lu, who was still restraining Gui Yezi. Boss Lu's demonic arts had already weakened him greatly. He seemed to be using his own life to help see Goblin King escape. How can we help him? Xiao Shui asked anxiously. Mu Yu observed Boss Lu's situation. At this time, Boss Lu was protected by the formation, so close yet worlds apart. But in fact, it was not necessary, because at this time, except for Gui Yezi, the rest of the people from the Gate of Hell had been killed by Mu Yu. He doesn't need our help. It seems like the Sea Demon King is about to struggle free, Mu Yu said in surprise. At this moment, Gui Yezi suddenly let out another wild roar, as if he could no longer suppress the Sea Goblin King's resistance within his body. The entire black fog suddenly exploded, revealing Gui Yezi's body. After Boss Lu's blood passed through the totem, it emitted a dazzling bloody light, gradually awakening the Sea Goblin King. After all, Sea Goblin King was once a figure on par with Master Xianjizi. Even if Gui Yezi relied on the Blood Realm Devil Puppet and Blood Realm Devil Soul to control him, at this time, there was a backlash. Boss Lu's demonic arts were taught by White Ape Demon King, and the demonic arts between demonic kings were much more powerful than those of the Gate of Hell. Gui Yezi roared angrily. The flesh on his body had already split open, turning into ghost fog and peeling off. His body gradually withered, revealing the skeleton of Sea Goblin King. Coveting my body, you people from the Gate of Hell are really black sheep, Sea Goblin King's voice echoed above the demon island, letting Mu Yu and the others breathe a sigh of relief. Gui Yezi was still unwilling to give up, and was still desperately fighting for control of the body. But Sea Goblin King had already seized the initiative, and a powerful demonic energy burst forth from his body, scattering all of the ghost fog. Damn it! Gui Yezi's soul had already jumped out of Sea Goblin King's body, and landed in the sky above the demon island. His expression was gloomy, and he angrily glared at Sea Goblin King. Sea Goblin King, I didn't expect you to still have a trick up your sleeve. Gui Yezi's voice was incomparably resentful. He had been planning for so long, but at the last moment there was still a mistake, and everything had been for nothing. Are you still not going to surrender? Sea Goblin King's skeleton slowly walked towards Boss Lu, and with every step he took, the entire demon island would tremble, as if to welcome the return of their king, and the aura of the entire demon island began to become more and more restless. Surrender without a fight? You think you've won? Gui Yezi sneered, and suddenly reached out with his hand, and the cracked Blood Realm Devil Puppet on the ground was caught in his hand. Although Gui Xiaoming was no longer attached to the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, the power of the Blood Realm Devil Puppet seemed to have not dissipated. Gui Yezi's soul was black, and filled with a strange and eerie aura. After the Blood Realm Devil Puppet touched Gui Yezi, it suddenly emitted a dark light, and Gui Yezi and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet fused together. Unlike Gui Xiaoming, after Gui Yezi and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet fused together, Gui Yezi's aura was even more terrifying than Gui Xiaoming's. This was not only because Gui Yezi had the strength of a crossing tribulation stage expert, but more importantly, Gui Yezi had become the host of the Blood Realm Devil Soul. The combination of the Blood Realm Devil Soul and the Blood Realm Devil Puppet far exceeded Gui Xiaoming's strength. At this time, Gui Yezi still only had one head, but he smiled eerily and rushed into the sky. The domain of the suppressing demon pagoda could not trap him. He stretched out his hand, and suddenly, a red figure floated over from the distant sea. It was another person from the Gate of Hell. Gui Yezi did not choose to let everyone onto the demon island, but left some people outside to wait for orders, and to guard the people who were originally going to be sacrificed to the flesh-winged horned monster. This person from the Gate of Hell's cultivation was at the severed soul stage. When he was caught by Gui Yezi, he looked a little flustered and did not understand what was going on. You are Master Gui Yezi? After the captured person from the Gate of Hell saw the person who caught him, he thought of the purpose of his trip and was not surprised. He glanced at the situation of the demon island below and did not see any of his companions from the Gate of Hell, which made him a little surprised. Gue Yezi sneered, "It seems that you have to make a sacrifice." Gue Yezi quickly jumped into the air, and the blood mist on his body suddenly rolled out. Gue Yezi controlled the Blood Realm Devil Soul, and after fusing with the Blood Realm Devil Puppet, his body became very strange. The captured person from the Gate of Hell did not have time to ask what this meant, and the blood mist spread out from Gue Yezi's body and suddenly enveloped him. Ah! The person from the Gate of Hell let out a scream, and then no longer made a sound. His body's cultivation was constantly rising, and at the same time, his appearance changed, and he became Gue Yezi's appearance. Gue Yezi's cultivation had reached the peak of the crossing calamity stage, and his appearance caused the weather to change dramatically again. Ghost chi was dense, and countless resentful spirits were constantly howling and shouting, eyeing the people on the demon island covetously. The skeleton of the Siren King stopped beside Boss Lu. Boss Lu's aura was very weak at the moment, but his face was quite respectful. He knew his mission, and now only the blood in his body could revive the Siren King and defeat Gue Yezi. "Master Siren King, you can start to strip the blood from my body," Boss Lu said with a face full of determination. The Siren King patted Boss Lu's shoulder and said with a dignified expression, "It's been hard on you. Even if it means death." Boss Lu did not shrink back. Even if he knew that after his blood was drained, death would be waiting for him, but he was willing to give up his life for the great cause of the demon race's revitalization. Muyu frowned and looked at all this without saying anything. Blood was already flowing out from Boss Lu's wrist, and as if it was summoned, it was like a nimble line of blood in the air, wrapping around the skeleton of the Siren King. At the same time, Xiao Shui's seawater also merged into the Siren King's body along with the blood. The blood in the Siren King's body began to flow regularly, gradually forming blood vessels, and the seawater wrapped around the blood vessels like a skin, making the Siren King's entire skeleton gradually fill out. As the Siren King's body was reconstructed, his aura also rose higher and higher. A majestic aura reverberated over the entire demon island, gradually competing with Gue Yezi's aura, and even faintly surpassing Gue Yezi's. Boss Lu's face was already pale, and his skin had already dried up. His entire body became weak and feeble, but his eyes revealed a gratified expression, and he did not regret being a sacrifice for the resurrection of the Siren King. But at this moment a green light flashed, cutting off the connection between the Siren King and Boss Lu. Muyu held the Shadow Clone Sword and stood beside Boss Lu, frowning as he said, "Don't go too far, this bit of blood should be enough. Little friend Muyu, this is of my own volition, please." Boss Lu was dispirited, but he still spoke urgently. "Today's killing is enough." Muyu calmly looked at the Siren King, who had turned seawater into skin. Whether it was the style of the demon race or the people of the Gate of Hell, he did not like it. That kind of sacrificial method made him uncomfortable, and Boss Lu was a loyal person, and Muyu did not want to see him die like this. "Little friend Muyu, it doesn't matter if I die, but only if the Siren King absorbs enough blood can he recover." Boss Lu lightly waved his wrist, wanting to draw out the little blood left in his body. "Hey, I haven't allowed you to die yet." Dragon Vine stretched out its tail from Muyu's shoulder and patted Boss Lu's face. Boss Lu's face was full of respect. "Lord True Dragon, this bit of blood is indeed enough." The Siren King had already turned into an elegant middle-aged man, and seawater revolved around his body, forming a blue robe that covered his body. He looked at Muyu face to face, and wanted to see something from Muyu's eyes, but Muyu's eyes were clear and calm, without any ripples. "It is rare for a human race to have someone like you," the Siren King praised. "I hope that the one I saved is not an evil Siren King." Muyu put away the Shadow Clone Sword and sat cross-legged once again, starting to adjust his breathing. The Siren King remained silent for a while, and then revealed a cultured and elegant smile. "Don't worry. I am a scholar, and I teach my people to learn about the sea at any time, so that they can live a better life. Mu Yu's heart skipped a beat. The Siren King gave him the feeling of a scholar who had the image of an emperor. When the Siren King had just escaped from Zhe Dui's Nirvana formation technique, the Siren King had spoken very politely, and when he had been stopped by Seahorse Taotao on the Holy Road, Seahorse Taotao had also said that the Siren King required every clansman to learn about the sea, so that they could live a better life. The Siren King had overturned Mu Yu's view of Siren Kings. He had always thought that Siren Kings were tyrannical and unreasonable beings like the white ape, but now it seemed that the white ape's preconceived image had caused Mu Yu to misunderstand. However, I will not be merciful when killing an intruder. The Siren King's voice became serious, and the white sea calming thousand ruler appeared in his hand. This magic treasure had been left behind by the Siren King when Gue Yezi left his body. His gaze darkened, and a tyrannical aura soared into the sky, causing the whole island to shake violently. Then he disappeared from where he was, and took a step forward, standing in the sky, and coldly glancing at Gue Yezi in the sky. Chapter 733. The Sea Goblin King's aura seemed to be connected with the whole island. There seemed to be something moving rhythmically on the island. The ground also emitted a blue brilliance that merged with the Sea Goblin King's body. The suppressing demon pagoda's domain seemed to be attacked by some mysterious power. It became unstable and was about to break free. Little friend Mu Yu, you already control the suppressing demon pagoda, right? The Sea Goblin King turned his head and asked. Yes, Mu Yu replied. The Sea Goblin King's sea-calming thousand ruler flickered with blue brilliance. He pointed it at Gue Yezi and said, then release the demon island's shackles. Otherwise, with my power, I will destroy this magic treasure. Although the Sea Goblin King was trapped by this magic treasure for several thousand years, he didn't think of destroying it. He just asked Mu Yu to put it away. This surprised Mu Yu. Normally, if someone was trapped by something for several thousand years, the first thing they would do after coming back would be to destroy it. Mu Yu's mind moved. The suppressing demon pagoda's domain power was already very weak. It couldn't help at all. He controlled the suppressing demon pagoda's domain power. With just a thought, the suppressing demon pagoda's restriction on the demon island was completely removed. It was no longer suppressing the whole island. Now it's our turn to settle accounts, Gue Yezi. The Sea Goblin King's expression was solemn. He stood there, and his every movement was filled with the demeanor of a king. The whole demon island began to tremble. Resuscitation was like the resuscitation of a dormant beast. Some deep pits began to appear on the ground. Waves of aura that made people's heart palpitate spread from the deep pits. Crash! A large amount of seawater suddenly shot out from the deep pit of the demon island, and every rock on the island began to flip, as if something was trying to crawl out from the ground. Then, the rocks kept rolling and were washed into the air by the seawater. 81 rocks were arranged in an orderly manner in the air every few tens of meters. Every rock was connected by a thin line of seawater. These rocks looked ordinary, and they were covered with coral reefs and seaweed. The 81 huge rocks were like a cage, trapping Gue Yezi inside. Do you think you can trap me with just a few pieces of trash? Too naive. Gue Yezi shouted coldly. His body turned into a crimson shadow as he rushed towards the cracks in the rock. He wanted to escape the encirclement of the 81 rocks, but the seemingly thin lines of seawater formed a blue barrier that blocked Gue Yezi's path. What? Gue Yezi was furious. The Blood Realm Devil Souls and Blood Realm Devil Puppets were evil things that even Taoist Master Xian Jizi's domain couldn't do anything to, but they were trapped by these seemingly ordinary 81 stones. Everything has its weakness. Don't you understand this principle? This is my territory, not a place where you can behave atrociously. The sea-calming thousand ruler left the Sea Demon King's hand, and it quickly became bigger in the air. Soon after, a several hundred-meter tall wave was raised outside the Demon Island, and it covered the sky. Every wave was revolving, and it turned into many waterspouts, and it surged violently with the sea-calming thousand ruler as its center. Gui Yezi's face had become extremely gloomy. These monstrous waves were a huge threat to him, and he knew that it would be very difficult for him to get anything out of this trip. Soul Puppet Descend. Gui Yezi had planned many things for this day, but his plan was ruined step by step. Even so, he still had two trump cards in his hands: the Blood Realm Devil Puppets and the Blood Realm Devil Souls. A huge skeleton emerged from the blood mist that filled the sky. This skeleton was over 100 meters long. The bones of its entire body were not purely in the shape of a human. Instead, they were formed from the bones of various demon beasts. There were sharp bone spikes everywhere, and a huge bone claw swung down with a gust of wind. When the skeletons descended, the entire sky was covered by a layer of gloomy ghost fog. The sky was dark, as if it was about to collapse. All kinds of blood souls floated around the skeletons, drilling in and out of the gaps of the skeletons. Sea Demon King, your body is mine, Gui Yezi roared. The skeleton in the air stretched out its fist, and with a punch the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Black cracks appeared in the air, as if it couldn't bear such a huge power. The waves were surging violently under the fist's wind, and the Demon Island seemed to be in imminent danger. It could be smashed to pieces by this punch at any time. You want my body? You're not enough. Sea Demon King stood in the sky above the Demon Island, and the Demon Island emitted an incomparably powerful blue light, forming a shield that tightly protected the Demon Island. Obviously, Sea Demon King didn't want the battle between him and Gui Yezi to affect the people on the Demon Island. Otherwise, if the two of them went all out, everyone on the Demon Island would be in danger. My lord rises and falls. The power of the domain instantly covered Gui Yezi's body, and it also affected everyone. Everyone felt as if their bodies had become weightless. They were like a lonely and helpless boat, drifting along the surging waves, completely unable to control the direction of their movements. In this domain, they couldn't even control their own bodies, so how could they fight with the other party? Mu Yu was surprised to feel the power of the domain around him. Just like what he saw in the image left by Taoist Master Xianjizi, the Sea Demon King's domain could restrict people's movement. In this domain, it seemed that everything was up to fate and there was no autonomy. The huge skeleton summoned by Gui Yezi punched out in the air, and when the fist smashed down, countless bone spurs turned into a dense number of sharp cones and entered the Sea Demon King's domain. However, Gui Yezi still miscalculated. The Sea Demon King's domain ability was far beyond his imagination. When Boss Lu returned the blood in his body to Sea Demon King had already recovered most of his strength. This strength had already reached the heaven-defying great vehicle stage, and it was still stronger than Gui Yezi. The Soul Puppet's fist hit the Sea Demon King's domain, but it was like hitting cotton, and everything seemed soft and powerless. Wherever the fist went, countless waves appeared out of nowhere in the air. These splashing waves wrapped around the Soul Puppet's skeleton, and the seawater was like ropes that wrapped around the Soul Puppet's skeleton, removing all of the force. Those bone spurs that turned into sharp cones in the air seemed to have encountered a huge transparent water screen, and all of the sharp cones became extremely slow. The waves rolled, and all of the sharp cones were scattered, and they were dragged to the bottom of the sea, disappearing without a trace. Damn it! Gui Yezi roared in shock and anger, and wanted to control the Soul Puppet skeleton to leave the Sea Demon King's domain. However, the Sea Demon King's anger had already been mixed in with the waves that filled the sky. The waves that were a few hundred meters tall suddenly rose to a few thousand meters or tens of thousands of meters, and they had the power to destroy heaven and earth, and they crashed down on the soul puppet's skeleton from all directions. In an instant, the sky darkened and the sky collapsed. It was as if the end of the world had arrived, and it could destroy everything in the world. The seemingly huge soul puppet skeleton looked so small in front of this terrifying water screen. It stood there, and it had already lost its sense of propriety, and it didn't know where to escape to, because the waves had already blocked all of its escape routes. Boom! 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 A deafening sound reverberated through the clouds, and the entire sea seemed to have experienced a catastrophe. All of the seawater seemed to have been swept up into the sky, and then returned to the sea, and even the ground shook violently without end. Even though the demon island was protected by a mysterious blue radiance, the ground was still forcibly torn in two by this extremely shocking earthquake, and it extended from one end of the island to the other, dividing the entire island into two. What a terrifying power! Muyu was extremely shocked in his heart. Just now, the Sea Demon King seemed to have lifted up the entire sea's seawater, and then poured it down. That kind of world-shaking power smashed down, and even a 1,000-meter-tall mountain would be smashed into pieces, let alone the soul puppet's skeleton. Lord Sea Demon King's ability to control water is too powerful. Qiao Shui was extremely shocked. Although she could control water, her ability to control water seemed so weak in front of the Sea Demon King. With her current cultivation, it was impossible for her to control such a vast amount of seawater. Gui Yezi was also intimidated by the Sea Demon King's monstrous waves, and he forcibly resisted this terrifying torrential downpour of seawater, but at this moment, shocking cracks appeared all over his body, and then with a crash, the body he seized from his own people also turned into ashes, leaving behind only the already destroyed skull. Never have any ideas about my dynasty, Sea Demon King lightly shouted, and all kinds of tentacles suddenly extended from the waterspout. These tentacles were completely made of seawater, and they swept towards Gui Yezi from different directions. Gui Yezi's body spread out a powerful ghost fog, and he wanted to resist these tentacles' attack. But the tentacles seemed to have entered into no man's land, and penetrated the ghost fog, and all of them pierced into Gui Yezi's head. I am not reconciled. Gui Yezi looked up to the sky and roared, but the seawater had already poured into his head through the cracks on his skull, and then his eyeballs were flushed out by the seawater in his head, and the seawater turned into water pillars that shot out from his 7 orifices. Bang! Gui Yezi left behind an unwilling scream in the air, and his head directly exploded, and countless souls burst out from his body. These souls were the souls that Gui Yezi collected on the island, and after losing Gui Yezi's suppression, they unexpectedly regained their consciousness. What's going on? It's the Sea Demon King. The Sea Demon King has broken free. These souls in the air looked at the Sea Demon King towering above the waves with bewilderment, and the souls of the devil race were already cheering, and the souls of the human race were silently looking at the Sea Demon King. The Sea Demon King that they had guarded for more than 5,000 years finally broke free from the seal. If you don't have Xian Jizi's cultivation, then don't have any ideas about me. Sea Demon King waved his hand, and all the waves returned to the sea, and the 81 rocks also entered the demon island, as if nothing had happened. All the tremors just now didn't affect the living people on the demon island, but the demon island was already shaken into 2 halves. Sea Demon King put his hands together, and the waves of the sea violently rolled up again, and fiercely collided with the 2 sides of the demon island, and the whole demon island once again issued a huge tremor, and then the separated demon island was once again gathered together by the huge force of the sea. Long live the Sea Demon King! All the devil race people, whether they were souls or living devil race people, loudly cheered and cheered for their king. Qiao Shui was also cheering, and only Mu Yu was silently looking at all of this, and like those silent souls of the human race, he didn't say anything. These souls that had been trapped for more than 5,000 years had always been guarding this demon island for Daoist Xianjizi, and didn't let the Sea Demon King come into being, but now it seemed that the Sea Demon King's coming into being was a foregone conclusion. We are free. Mu Mingfei was standing among the souls, and she was very conspicuous. She floated to Mu Yu's side, and looked deeply at Mu Yu. Freedom comes at the price of death. Xiao Shui said seriously. That's right. Freedom comes at the price of death. Mu Mingfei laughed and didn't say anything. Chapter 734. The Sea Fiend King stood there, accepting the worship of all the fiend's souls. Only the souls of the human race seemed very disappointed. The Sea Fiend King's escape was a huge blow to them. They had been trapped on the island for 5,000 years, always fighting against the fiend's souls. They didn't expect the fiends to win in the end. However, they also understood that if the Sea Fiend King hadn't acted today, all their souls would have become ghost soldiers in the hands of Gui Yezi. At this time, the shackles of the fiend's sealing pagoda on the island had been removed. All the souls could leave freely. These souls had been dead for a long time because the power of the domain allowed them to retain their consciousness. However, now that the domain had disappeared, their consciousness could only be maintained for a few more hours. After a few hours, all the souls' consciousness would dissipate. At that time, the souls could no longer be seen, and no one knew where they would go. I can finally be free. Helian Kong floated out of the soul tool. His soul was still very weak. Although he had suffered a lot, he could still wait until the domain was removed, so he wouldn't be trapped on this island forever. Senior, are you okay? Mu Yu looked at Helian Kong, and a warm feeling welled up in his heart. Helian Kong was a senior worthy of his respect. When he first came to the island, if it wasn't for Helian Kong's protection, he probably wouldn't have been able to survive against Gui Yiming. I'm fine. Mu Yu, you were able to destroy the people of the Gate of Hell. You really are the pride of our Pill Cauldron School. Helian Kong patted Mu Yu's shoulder with a smile. Mu Yu felt like his shoulder was hit by a piece of ice, and a bone-chilling cold invaded his body. However, Mu Yu suddenly felt that this greeting was very intimate. Mu Mingfei looked into the distance and revealed a charming smile. She must have been a devastatingly beautiful woman when she was alive. Brother Helian, your wish of so many years has finally come true, hasn't it? Helian Kong smiled and said, Yes. I've guarded the island day and night for more than 5,000 years. Being able to leave is also a blessing. Mu Mingfei floated into the air. Brother Helian, I'll be leaving first. Helian Kong nodded. I still have some things to say to Mu Yu. See you later, never. The sea breeze caused Mu Yu's clothes to flutter. Mu Mingfei had already left the demon island. Before her consciousness dissipated, she wanted to get as far away from the demon island as possible. She wanted to leave the demon island where they had been imprisoned for more than 5,000 years. Even if her soul consciousness dissipated, it should happen outside the demon island. Helian Kong looked at Mu Yu with praise. I am very gratified that the Pill Cauldron sect has sent such an outstanding junior. At least it means that the Pill Cauldron sect has not declined. Mu Yu gritted his teeth. The Alchemy Cauldron sect would not decline, but Helian Kong would eventually die. He originally wanted to inscribe a soul anchoring array to protect Helian Kong like how he protected Deadwood Daddy, but the soul anchoring array was too complicated. He had never tried it before, and Mu Yu wasn't confident that he could inscribe it perfectly. He needed a few days to prepare, and Helian Kong's consciousness probably wouldn't last more than a few hours. It's a pity that the Yao Sealing Pagoda can't be used. Otherwise we could have brought you along, Little Shui said regretfully. The Yao Sealing Pagoda had been severely damaged. After Mu Yu removed its imprisonment on the demon island, the power of the domain gradually disappeared. He also couldn't use the Yao Ceiling Pagoda to protect Helian Kong's soul. The Yao Ceiling Pagoda was repairing itself and wouldn't leave the Demon Island. As for how long it would take, Mu Yu didn't know because the pagoda spirit had already floated out of his body and entered the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The pagoda spirit also cut off its connection with Mu Yu. At this time, the Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal appeared in Mu Yu's hand. This was the key to opening the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. After the pagoda spirit gave it to Mu Yu, the Yao Ceiling Pagoda fell into a deathly silence. The Heavenly Birth Reincarnation Seal needed the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's powerful spiritual power as a foundation to return to the past. After leaving the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, there wouldn't be enough power to support Mu Yu to return to the past. This power needed to be at least at the Great Ascension stage. Senior, can a soul tool protect your soul? Mu Yu asked seriously. After a soul died, their consciousness wouldn't be retained for too long. Helian Kong and the others were able to retain their consciousness because of the Yao Ceiling Pagodas. All laws returned to origin domain. But now that the Yao Ceiling Pagoda's domain had disappeared, it meant that the consciousness of these souls would soon dissipate. Helian Kong shook his head. A soul tool doesn't have that ability. Now that you've destroyed the conspiracy of the Gate of Hell, and the souls on the Demon Island have obtained freedom, it's time for me to leave. Then what can I do for you? Mu Yu looked at Helian Kong. Ever since he came to the Demon Island, Helian Kong had been helping him and helping him avoid being framed by the people of the Gate of Hell. But in the end, Gui Yeming bore a grudge against him and was tortured by the people of the Gate of Hell. Mu Yu still felt a trace of guilt towards Helian Kong. He really wanted to do something for Helian Kong. Back then, I took in a disciple. He was an orphan named Helian Tai. Although he's long gone, if you can see his descendants when you return to the Pill Cauldron sect, please take care of them. Helian Kong thought of his disciple and smiled. When I left, he was the same age as you. It's just that his talent wasn't as high as yours. I will, Senior. Mu Yu's expression dimmed. Mu Yu wasn't very familiar with the Pill Cauldron sect. He hadn't stayed there for long. If it wasn't for Deadwood Daddy, he wouldn't even have any relationship with the Pill Cauldron sect. However, Mu Yu didn't tell Helian Kong this. Since this was Helian Kong's request, Mu Yu would naturally pay attention to it. The restriction has been lifted. The people of the Gate of Hell are dead. You seem to have some relationship with the demon race. I don't need to worry about your safety. This matter is over. You don't need to worry about anything. Helian Kong smiled. Then where will you go? Mu Yu asked. Where would the soul return to? Xian Jizi said that the three-layered palace was located at the intersection of reincarnation and arranged for the soul's reincarnation. However, Mu Yu also understood that the three-layered palace would use the soul power of every soul that entered reincarnation to maintain their strength. Helian Kong would eventually become the power of the three-layered palace. Helian Kong looked at the sea with satisfaction. I don't know where to go. What I want to do the most is to go back to the Pill Cauldron sect and see how the cultivation world has developed. However, I know that I can't float to the mainland, so I'll go wherever I can. At least I can leave this cage-like demon island and feel the embrace of freedom. Even if I die, I will have no regrets. They had been trapped on a demon island for 5,000 years, unable to cultivate, unable to see living people, and not knowing what had happened in the cultivation world. In order to pass the time, they had chosen to compete with the demon race for territory. Over time, they had long been tired of this kind of life. Every quarter of an hour on the demon island was like suffering. He had always yearned for freedom, even if it was short-lived. Even if I die, I will have no regrets? Mu Yu didn't like death, but he now had the power to kill. Wherever there was killing, there was death. He had a special view of death. Other than those with the eternal physique, everyone would die, but everyone's attitude towards death was different. Yes, I've already died once. Death is not scary to me. Helian Kong's expression was calm, without any worry. For example, Long Xingyun was willing to betray his own race in order to survive. Like most people, he was afraid of death. However, Helian Kong was different. He had once died for the human race, and now he was dying for freedom. Mu Yu met many people who were not afraid of death. For example, they treated Mu Yu as their own child. They used their blood to protect Mu Yu and didn't let Mu Yu revive their deadwood daddy. In order to protect the entire cultivation world, they chose to sacrifice their own master, Jian Ing Chen Feng. In order to revive the Sea Demon King, they were willing to sacrifice themselves. In order to pursue freedom, Helian Kong chose freedom. They all chose death for a certain belief. In the eyes of some people, death was not scary at all. Mu Yu didn't know how to look at death. This was a process that everyone had to go through. However, some people were forced to die, some people chose to die early, and some people died for freedom. However, Mu Yu rejected death. It wasn't that he was afraid of death, but that he didn't like to see others die in front of him. The death of others would bring him a sense of despair. It was like a life full of vitality coming to an abrupt end, catching him off guard. What does death really mean? After being possessed by the power to kill, he was puzzled by the word death. Spirit Lord Mu Yu possessed a very heaven-defying domain, which was the ability that Mu Yu had always wanted to regain. Life and death in the blink of an eye. Life and death were only in the blink of an eye. Death seemed to have become so simple. Death might be another adventure, right? Helian Kong explained with a smile. Mu Yu was silent. Helian Kong regarded death very lightly, but he felt sorry for Helian Kong. I can feel the power to kill that you used. You have to be more careful in the future. You are a member of my alchemy sect. I hope you can live safe and sound for yourself and for those who care about you, Helian Kong said seriously. I understand, Senior. Mu Yu felt very uncomfortable in his heart. When the power to kill wandered in Mu Yu's body, he longed to kill and control the lives of others. On one hand, he liked the power to kill, but on the other hand, he rejected the feeling of death. This made him feel very conflicted. How should he balance the relationship between the two? Mu Yu, I'll leave my soul tool to you for safekeeping. Bring it back to the alchemy sect and bury it in the alchemy sect's mausoleum. It can be considered as returning to my homeland. I want to take advantage of the fact that I'm still conscious to see the scene outside the Demon Island, Helian Kong said. Mu Yu had already engraved a formation that could preserve images on the soul tool and imprinted Helian Kong's image on it. Only in this way could he prove Helian Kong's identity. After a long time, Mu Yu said again, I'm sorry, Senior. I can't protect your soul. He tried his best. Deadwood Daddy's soul anchoring formation could only hold one soul and couldn't protect Helian Kong. Helian Kong patted Mu Yu's shoulder and said with a gratified smile, It's okay. I'm already indifferent to life and death. Being able to enjoy a moment of freedom is enough. Mu Yu was very disappointed. He hoped that he could help Helian Kong return to the third continent to take a look at the cultivation world. He wanted to see how the cultivation world had changed. However, Mu Yu was unable to do so. The sea breeze became stronger and stronger. Mu Yu's hair fluttered in the wind. Helian Kong had already flown towards the sea. After the battle, the sky was cloudless and blue. The sun shone pleasantly on the sea, making the surface of the sea sparkle. Helian Kong's figure gradually disappeared at the end of the sea. He calmly pursued that brief moment of freedom before death. His white body appeared so wholly under the sun. He opened his arms, wanting to embrace the entire real world one last time before his consciousness dissipated. He also wanted to embrace freedom. The sun just happened to shine on Helian Kong's soul. Specks of starlight rose from the sea in the distance, gradually blurring Helian Kong's soul, as if it had melted into the sun. It was a sad scene, solemn and stirring, yet beautiful. Chapter 735. Only the goblin clansmen and Mu Yu were left on the demon island. The souls of the humans had already left, while the goblin clansmen's souls also gradually dissipated on the demon island. Little friend Mu Yu, there is a matter that I must discuss with you. The Sea Demon King walked over and spoke in a friendly tone. He was like an amiable uncle. Even though he was a demon king with great power, and could change the color of the sea with a raise of his hand, he didn't put on airs as a demon king to make people have a good impression of him. What is it? Mu Yu didn't dislike the Sea Demon King. At least, the Sea Demon King was a normal demon king compared to the White Ape Demon King, who always shamelessly wanted to be his father-in-law and disliked him. I need to bring the dragon vine with you back to the Azure Dragon Dynasty, the Sea Demon King said. Mu Yu furrowed his brows slightly. I won't go, the dragon vine replied straightforwardly. You are a true dragon, and you only have such a little cultivation. You don't have any ability to protect yourself in the outside world. Only my big brother Azure Dragon can help you. The Sea Demon King wasn't annoyed by the dragon vine's cold attitude, and he still spoke warmly. I have lived for several years without any ability to protect myself. I don't want to go to a place full of mixed-blood dragons, the dragon vine said proudly. The Azure Dragon Dynasty had already evolved into a place where those with true dragon's bloodline were respected. This meant that the Azure Dragon Dynasty was full of mixed-blood dragons. Mu Yu pondered for a moment before he asked the Sea Demon King, "Will you leave this place?" This was the Sea Demon King's dynasty, and it had the Sea Demon King's palace. It was the Sea Demon King's home. Now that the Sea Demon King had escaped, he should establish his own dynasty anew. So, how could the Sea Demon King be willing to leave? The Sea Demon King said with a smile, "This place has already changed. Most of the goblin clansmen in the sea have already disappeared. If I stay here, I'll just be a general without an army. I need to meet the Azure Dragon and understand the cultivation world. I need to discuss the next step." Next step? Are you going to fight over territory with the humans? Mu Yu asked calmly. Fighting for territory with the human race was a very sensitive topic. Mu Yu represented the human clan, while the Sea Demon King was the demon clan's leader. However, Mu Yu unintentionally helped the Sea Demon King once again, and this was why it wasn't wise to discuss this issue at this time. The Sea Demon King sized up Mu Yu and said thoughtfully, "You are worried about a certain matter, but it doesn't seem like you are worried about fighting over territory with our demon clan. What are you worried about?" Mu Yu shook his head. "The rise of the demon race has nothing to do with me. I don't care if you want to fight for territory with the human race. However, the Threefold Palace has set some rules for the game. If you want to participate, you have to consider the Threefold Palace." Mu Yu didn't care about whose territory was bigger or smaller. Right now, he was most concerned about his master's safety. What he regretted the most was that Deadwood Daddy hadn't revived yet. He only wanted to do two things: revive his father and save his master. 3 palaces? As a matter of fact, I didn't look for the Azure Dragon for the Demon Clan's rise, but for the Yu Clan's people. The Sea Demon King stopped smiling, and his expression became solemn. Yu Clan? The Yu Clan's people imprisoned in the demon-subduing pagoda are already dead. You don't need to worry about this. Mu Yu stroked the Shadow Clone sword in his hand. Mu Ling was hidden in the Shadow Clone sword, and those loathsome monsters with fleshy wings and horns had already been turned into murderous power, and they became Mu Ling's nourishment. You are wrong. It's precisely because the Yu Clan's people in the demon-subduing pagoda are dead that we need to worry, the Sea Demon King said with a grave expression. They are already dead, so what is there to worry about? Mu Yu asked in confusion. I heard that Jian Ingchen Feng is your master, And your master is an extremely powerful person. Didn't he tell you about the Yu clan's people? The Sea Demon King's scholarly eyes shone with a strange light. He definitely knew far more than Mu Yu, which made Mu Yu more and more confused. Just what kind of truth was hidden in the dust of history? Master never mentioned the Yu clan to me, Mu Yu replied honestly. His master never mentioned many things to him. He originally thought that Jian Yingchen Feng was only the sect master of the Falling Dust sect, and that he could leisurely cultivate in the Falling Dust Mountain, accompanying his master and messing around with his fellow disciples. However, that was far from the truth. A few years ago, Gui Xuanyue's arrival had uncovered his master's dust-covered past, and Mu Yu had slowly come to understand what kind of person his master was. He was a true god of the three continents, an immortal, the person who sealed demon kings, the person who trapped the Yu clan, and even the person who protected the heavenly birth reincarnation seal, and explained that he was someone who lived in the past. Just what kind of identity did his master have? Then have you not considered one thing? Jian Yingchen Feng's abilities were more than enough to kill the Yu clan, but why didn't he kill them, and instead trap them in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda for so many years? The Sea Demon King knew the truth of the matter. His expression became uncertain, as if he had recalled some past events, which made him frown deeply. Mu Yu's heart was slightly shaken. He really hadn't considered this question. In the beginning, he only thought that the flesh-winged horned monsters were unkillable, which was why they were imprisoned in Master Xian Jizi's treasure. However, now that he thought about it, it was impossible for there to be an unkillable existence in the world. There were always more powerful people hiding in the shadows, and Jian Yingchen Feng was one of them. With Jian Yingchen Feng's cultivation, it was impossible for him to not be able to kill the Yu clan. At the very least, he could find something like the mysterious spirit of extreme daylight to kill the Yu clan. So just what had happened? The Sea Demon King sighed and said, "The death of the Yu clan means that the three heavens will be in danger again." These words made Mu Yu even more confused. The survival of the Yu clan meant that the three heavens would be in danger, so why did the Sea Demon King say that the death of the Yu clan would put the three heavens in danger? Mu Yu knew that the destruction of the two heavens was due to the White Ape Demon King rebelling against the Yu clan and offending some powerful existences. However, why did the White Ape Demon King resist? Where did the Yu clan come from? Why could only sealing the Demon King protect the Demon King? Mu Yu didn't understand the truth of these matters. After remaining silent for a long time, Mu Yu asked, "What kind of existences are the Yu clan?" The Sea Demon King raised his head and looked at the distant sea. His expression suddenly became somewhat desolate and unwilling. He sighed slowly and said, "The Yu clan isn't terrifying. They are only tools on the battlefield. The truly powerful ones are the ones behind them. There are all kinds of rules in this world, and neither you nor I can escape from them. If you want to defy the rules, you will have to pay the price." What rules? Mu Yu still didn't understand. The Sea Demon King's words were too general. The life and death of all living things in the world, as well as the reincarnation cycle, all follow certain rules. The heavenly law is the controller of all living things' rules. When our cultivation reaches the great ascension stage, we will comprehend our own domain ability. A domain is a kind of rule. The Great Ascension Stage's self-cultivators will have a preliminary glimpse of the rules set by the heavenly law. That kind of power will let you understand everything. However, even if I explain it to you now, you won't be able to understand it. The Sea Demon King didn't want to explain too much. He pondered over it repeatedly before continuing. You only need to understand that if someone wants to defy a certain rule, the Yu clan will be dispatched to erase everything. The Yu clan is specially used to carry out the mission of eliminating dissident. There is no time limit for the mission they carry out. Once all of the U-Clan's members who carry out the mission die, the person behind them will sense it and understand that the mission this time has already failed. They will dispatch even more powerful clans until the mission is completed. Is this the reason why the U-Clan's members were locked up and not killed? Muyu was somewhat shocked. He couldn't imagine the mastermind behind the U-Clan's mission to erase the three heavens. Who was it that had the power to destroy a world just like that? That's right, we call the existence behind the U-Clan the Heaven's Enforcer. The U-Clan is a slaughtering tool on the battlefield. The Heaven's Enforcer will know every time their numbers decrease. When all of the U-Clan's members die, the Heaven's Enforcer will understand that it is time to dispatch people to carry out the mission again. The Sea Demon King seemed to be somewhat resentful, but there was nothing he could do. The so-called Heaven's Enforcer was too powerful. He wasn't someone he could deal with. Mu Yu's mood suddenly became very heavy, because all of the imprisoned U-Clan's members were swallowed by the aura of death due to his mistake. Didn't that mean that the three heavens were in danger because of him? I'm sorry, the destruction of the U-Clan's members was caused by me. I thought they were wicked beyond redemption and deserved to be destroyed. When Mu Yu killed the flesh-winged horned monsters, he didn't think about this matter at all. At that time, he always thought that the flesh-winged horned monsters couldn't escape from the demon-subduing pagoda. They were wicked beyond redemption and deserved to die. You don't need to blame yourself. This time, the Gate of Hell's people were extremely daring and wanted to control the U-Clan's members. If their plan succeeded and the U-Clan's members broke out of the prison and appeared in the three heavens, then the consequences would be even more severe than now. Your master is a very powerful person. Everything he did at that time was to protect this world. Meanwhile, the U-Clan came to destroy this world. The Sea Demon King didn't feel any sympathy or pity for the death of the flesh-winged horned monsters. On the contrary, he felt that his hatred had been vented. However, the Sea Demon King's words made Mu Yu realize something that didn't make sense. From the Sea Demon King's words, he knew that the U-Clan was much more powerful than Yuman. Since his master's power was enough to capture and imprison the U-Clan's members, then he could completely eliminate Yuman, who was much weaker than the U-Clan's members. However, why did he use his own cultivation as the price to set up the immortal imprisoning prison to deal with Yuman? This didn't make sense at all. His master could completely use a magical treasure like the demon-subduing pagoda to imprison Yuman, like how he dealt with the U-Clan's members. He didn't need to use a formation like the immortal imprisoning prison that harmed others and himself. The most important thing was that with his power, how could he not detect the ambitions of the three heavens' white realm? Or could it be that the immortal imprisoning prison wasn't just used to imprison Yuman and had other goals? Did his master lose his cultivation for other reasons? The Sea Demon King continued, "Your plan to destroy the Gate of Hell's people was correct. At least we have the initiative now. When the Heaven's Enforcers make a comeback, we have time to make preparations." In the past, Jian Yingchen Feng relied on powerful methods to deceive everyone and deceive the Heaven's Enforcer's senses. I think that as long as Jian Yingchen Feng doesn't die, he can deceive the Heaven's Enforcers for a period of time. Mu Yu clenched his fists tightly. Could his master deceive the Heaven's Enforcers just because he was alive? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.